lumber for houses on
YouTube.com/GBH News.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Windsor Johnston. The 25% tariffs that were set to take effect on Mexican imports on Tuesday are on hold for 1 month. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum spoke to President Trump by phone today. She pledged to send 10,000 of her country's National Guard troops to the border to better prevent drug trafficking into the U.S. Trump had cited significant drug activity as one of the reasons for the tariffs. Trump is also expected to speak to Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau again later today to discuss the 25% tariffs that are set to take effect in that country tomorrow. The headquarters of the U.S. Agency for International Development is closed today, and employees in Washington, D.C. have been told to work from home. NPR's Shannon Bond reports the move comes amid turmoil within the agency.
USAID workers got the closure notice in an early Monday morning email. The agency manages billions of dollars in federal humanitarian assistance around the world, but its work has been thrown into upheaval in the last week, with nearly all its programs halted. Over the weekend, the USAID website was taken down without explanation. Tech billionaire Elon Musk says his Department of Government Efficiency is shutting down USAID entirely. Musk says President Trump supports the move. Trump accuses the aid agency of being poorly run. Senate Democrats say shuttering USAID would require congressional approval. The White House hasn't commented. Shannon Bond, NPR News.
A Marine battalion has landed at the U.S. naval base in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. NPR's Luke Garrett reports the service members will expand a facility meant to hold migrants detained in the U.S.
President Donald Trump wants to send 30,000 migrants to Guantanamo, a facility that's held at most 800 people. On Sunday, Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem told NBC News that the facility is, quote, building out some capacity.
We appreciate the partnership of the DOD in getting that up to the level that it needs to get to in order to facilitate this repatriation of people back to their country.
Guantanamo Bay is widely known for its military detention camp that's held terrorism suspects following the attacks on September 11, 2001. When asked, Noem said it was not the plan to hold migrants at Guantanamo indefinitely, but rather to have a process that follows the law. Luke Garrett, NPR News, Washington.
The head of the World Health Organization is urging world leaders to call on President Trump to reverse his decision to withdraw from the agency. The organization is warning that the United States will miss out on critical information about global disease outbreaks. A budget document presented at the agency's latest meeting showed the program has a heavy reliance on American funding. This is NPR News in Washington.
Good morning. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. The town of Nantucket has seen a noticeable change since the Trump administration's crackdown on illegal immigration and promise of mass deportations. For instance, the Nantucket Current reports that there's been noticeably less traffic on the roads, reports of people not showing up to work, and parents keeping their children home from school. And today, Monday, at least one island restaurant has closed its doors to join a nationwide Day Without Immigrants to send a message about the importance of immigrant workers. That restaurant is Casa Real, a Mexican Salvadoran-style restaurant that opened last year on Macy's Lane on the island. The owners say it'll close in solidarity today with other businesses and workers across the country who are also participating. Officials at the MBTA have asked the Federal Railroad Administration for permission to begin the final testing stage in the South Coast Rail project. On tap is a 90-day run-through or simulated service phase that can start as soon as the agency approves the plan. If and once approved, the T will be able to run trains at full speed and stop and open doors at each station, and then once federal regulators are satisfied with the outcome, those trains would be able to begin carrying passengers. Now, when would that be? Well, the New Bedford Light says it could possibly be this spring. In sports, it's Truck Day over at Fenway Park, leaving for Fort Myers. All eyes on Beanpot hockey tonight. BU and Harvard have the early game. Northeastern BC have the late game. 36 degrees outside our studios. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Workday. Workday is an AI platform for forward thinkers dedicated to transforming the way business leaders manage people and money today so they can transform tomorrow. Workday, moving business forever forward.
Houston Browdy, I am Marjorie Egan. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We are streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Going to be back at the Boston Public Library tomorrow, Wednesday, and Friday. And the governor will join us on Friday from 1 to 2, taking our questions and yours. Good morning.
Hey there, Marjorie. How are you?
Fine, thank you.
So over the weekend, Donald Trump announced new tariffs on the United States' largest trading partners, although it looks like some of those are already unraveling. Starting tomorrow, imports from Canada will pay 25% duties, and those from China 10%, although energy products from Canada will be tariffed at the lower 10%. According to a tweet moments ago from the Mexican president, Claudia Sheinbaum, the Trump administration has agreed to pause sweeping tariffs on Mexico, 25%, for a month while the two sides hammer out an agreement. Mexico has agreed to fortify its border with 10,000 National Guard troops to try to block the flow of drugs, especially fentanyl, across the border. And the United States, in turn, has agreed to work to avoid the trafficking of weapons to Mexico. In a couple of minutes, we'll open the phone and text lines. You can actually call or text now, 877-301-8970, to talk to you about Trump's tariffs. But first, here to help us make a little bit of sense of it, we are joined on Zoom by Jon Gruber. Jon is the chair of MIT's Department of Economics, where he's also the Ford Professor of Economics and was instrumental in creating both the Massachusetts healthcare reform and the Affordable Care Act. His latest book is Jumpstarting America, How Breakthrough Science Can Revive Economic Growth and the American Dream. Good to see you, Jon.
Good to see you, too.
So Jon Gruber, I guess we're not going to have to worry about the price of avocados and tequila for a few more days because Trump has reached an agreement with Mexico to wait for a month and the tariffs from there. But everything I've read about these tariffs, whether they're now or in a month, from economists like yourself, say they're a bad idea. So is there anybody who disagrees and thinks this is a good idea and this will help Americans' pocketbooks or anything else?
No one who doesn't have a political interest in feeling that way. I think one of the leading politicians who's being thoughtful about these issues is Ro Khanna, a representative out of California. And Ro said we need strategic trade, not tantrum trade. And I think that that's a great way to put it. This just doesn't make sense for a number of reasons. And one way to think about it is let's think about what they say the goals are. Let's play on Trump's turf. Why does he think it's a good idea? Well, one is he says, well, there's immigration and crime. There's fentanyl and immigrants coming over from these countries. We need to stop it. Well, a couple of things. First of all, as I mentioned last time we talked about this, if you put tariffs on a country and hurt their economy, that's going to increase the number of immigrants who want to come here. That's going to increase the need for people to turn to crime to make ends meet. That doesn't help with that. That just hurts. Now, you could say, well, look, we're going to use this as a threat to get them to take actions. And obviously Mexico is doing that. But then wouldn't you say, I'm going to put this on you in a month if you don't do this? Why would you put it on and then pull it off? That seems like just creating chaos for no particular reason. And then finally, like Canada, what the hell? I mean, like, we don't get a lot of immigrants. They don't send a lot of fentanyl. It's just like, I was just on the phone this morning with my Canadian co-authors on a paper I'm doing. They said they're going to make me do 25% more of the work now. It makes no sense. So that's the first argument. Makes no sense. Second argument they make is strategic, which is this is how we're going to help the U.S. economy, our key sectors. Well, first of all, here's the key thing to note. We already have pretty high tariffs on China that were put in place under Trump and kept under Biden that are on key sectors of technology, 25 to 100% tariffs. If that's really the argument, then, and we believe those sectors, and obviously Biden and Trump both agreed, then focus on those sectors. The argument for a broad tariff, we're not trying to promote our maple syrup industry. Okay, the argument that we want a broad tariff on everything that comes from Canada and Mexico just makes no sense at all. So
obviously, you watched Trevor Noah last night. I assume that's where that maple syrup came from?
No?
Yeah.
Well,
so it's going to cost $50.
I'll take that as a compliment.
Well, but can I cut to the chase here? It seems to me, from having done a lot of reading and gone back and listened to your tutorial for us a month or so ago, Tariffs equal tax increase for Americans, and they also are likely to lead to dramatic job losses here, aren't they?
Once again, to take the other side, the defense would be, in theory, tariffs don't have to lead to price increases. Under certain conditions, they wouldn't. But we actually ran the experiment under Trump, and they do lead to price increases. So let's be clear. The evidence is clear. They lead to price increases. That is a tax on Americans. It's equivalent to a sales tax. Now, we may say we need to raise tax revenues in America for reasons we've talked about in previous shows. But if you're going to use this as a way to raise money to cut corporate taxes, that's not really a very effective policy that benefits the U.S. consumer. So it's going to raise taxes. And look, what does Trump care about? He cares about the stock market. Well, I don't know what's happened since the news on Mexico broke, but it opened about 1.5% to 2% down.
Yeah.
Maybe it's going to, and the reason it's not more is because people think he's not serious. It's because of exactly what happened with Mexico. If he was credible and people really thought this was like a long run 20% tariff, stock market would be falling 10%.
So, okay. One last thing though, John, how about the job loss issue, or at least the job loss potential? What's your take on here? Meaning, what's your take on that?
The job picture is more mixed because on the one hand, it does protect some sectors. But on the other hand, these countries are going to retaliate. We're just going to end up worse off overall. So at the end of the day, it's unambiguous. Prices go up, jobs go down. We just end up in a worse place where instead of both of us trading, we both have 25% tariffs on each other. We're trading less and both economies are weaker.
So I know you're not a mind reader, but so why is Trump doing this?
I think that he wants to, to the extent I can project into that chaotic mind, I think that he wants to do this and then pull them off. He wants what happened in Mexico. He wants to basically use this as a threat, a bullying threat, deliver something like, look what I did, immigration went down, fentanyl went down, that's because of me.
Okay.
And my guess is that's why he's doing it, because it just makes no sense otherwise.
Okay, so John, Trevor, Noah Gruber, thank you so much for the brief tutorial. We appreciate it.
Thank you,
Talk
John.
to you soon.
Okay, see ya.
Yeah,
Bye.
we have been speaking, and we're grateful he gave us the time with Jon Gruber, Ford Professor of Economics and Chair of MIT's Department of Economics, instrumental in creating both the Massachusetts Healthcare Reform and the Affordable Care Act. Thanks again to Jon Gruber. Now we're going to open the lines to you at 877-301-8970. How do you feel about these tariffs? You're relieved you can wait a little bit more before the price of tequila goes up. 877-301-8970. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Okay, so here's the deal. The tariffs on China will go into effect tomorrow. The tariffs on Canada, unless he reverses himself, he being Trump on that too. And Mexico, a 30-day pause until we see what is going on. We get 40% of all of our trade is with Canada and Mexico. And, I'm thinking, Marjorie, at 877-301-8970 for your reaction to all of this, is he said prices will start going down on day one, and he meant to say, and they'll start going up on day 15, which is what, by the way, I'm listening to NPR this morning, and there's a guy from the Washington Times, which I assume everybody knows is a very conservative newspaper in Washington, and somebody who used to work for Joe Biden, a liberal-leaning economist. They agreed on every single one. The first question you asked to Jon Gruber, who supports this? And Gruber's answer is, other than a political agenda, and frankly, I don't understand the political agenda either, other than bully our allies, then hopefully get them to say, we can cut a deal like Sheinbaum did in Mexico.
They just did, didn't they?
Right, and so he's going to say the only reason we got this fabulous deal and fentanyl isn't coming across the border anymore, whether it is or not, is because I was strong and all that sort of thing. So regardless, Mexico's on hold. Canada's happening tomorrow, unless that's put on hold. Same with China at 10%. And the good news, I guess, is there'll be unlimited amounts of guacamole on Super Bowl Sunday.
Oh, that's very important, Jim, for Super Bowl.
I think that was part of the motivation.
But you mentioned something else that happened this morning, right?
What
How'd the stock market start out the morning?
Well, Gruber nailed it. We were looking at the stock market on CNN. It was down. The Dow was down like 600 points. As soon as he jumps back on, does a pause on Mexico, it's still down, but like 120 points, 130 points, and all that.
We have a texter who says he's more worried about Elon Musk and the 6 college students that have taken over the Treasury and get everybody's information about Social Security and Medicare.
We're going to talk about Musk in some depth tomorrow, but today it is tariff day because they're supposed to kick in tomorrow. And I assume people know, beer and alcohol, something in the neighborhood of
half of our fruits and vegetables.
Well, that's a big part of the Mexico thing.
Yeah.
But lumber for home construction and that sort of thing, a huge percentage of it comes from Canada. So I have to say, and by the way, this is not just because I'm not a huge Trump fan. I can't come up with one single argument as to why he's doing this other than to do what he does all the time. We're going to go nuts on Colombia, then Colombia will retreat. We're going to go nuts on Mexico, our major trade partner, and then Scheinbaum says we can cut a deal. But other than to show how tough he is there any? Why would he do this?
I used to think he was jealous of Pierre Trudeau's son there, Justin Trudeau, who's on the way out. So there's no reason to go after him now because he's on the way out. He's not popular anymore in Canada. But I just think it had a lot to do with that. Didn't like him, younger, better hair, that kind of thing.
Okay, 877. It's probably true, by the way.
You're laughing. I think that's true. I think he might be taller than Trump too. That probably drives him crazy.
Okay, fine. 877.
But you hear about how the Canadians are booing our national anthem? I didn't like that.
They did it at a basketball, an NBA game, and an NHL game.
I like Canadians. I mean, I have one of my cousins who's lived in Canada for 10 years and came back to the United States. I saw him over Christmas.
That's great.
He says, why is everybody so angry here in the United States? He said, look at the Patriots. The Patriots here, they're losing. Everybody says, what a bunch of bums. The coach is a bum. Everybody's a bum.
Fine, yeah.
In Canada, if our team, like the Patriots, were losing, we'd say, let's all get together and try to help them, Jim. So
Can I ask you one just question? Your point is what exactly?
Canada
what is your point?
It's a very nice, polite, wonderful country. And I don't know why we want to be mean to Canadians.
Okay, 877-3. I'm not sure what she means either, so that's okay.
We do not want to be mean to Canadians.
Okay, that's what we mean. Don't
They're
want to be mean.
They're a good ally of ours.
That's another thing. We're going to talk to Charlie
Sennott.
Sennott.
Soldiers have helped us in all these different
care.
endeavors.
This government does not care whether you're an ally or an enemy of the government. We're going to treat you equally badly. I mean, it's just unbelievable. And by the way, his excuse, excuse me. Are you going to talk about your cousin in Montreal again, or can I get...
No, he's not in Montreal. He's in Toronto.
Whatever he is.
The bathrooms.
Okay, they're much nicer in Canada, I know. But, Gruber touched on this, and then we're going to get to your calls, 877-301-8970. Is fentanyl and crossing the border allegedly the two major concerns?
Not very much fentanyl.
There's not much fentanyl coming across the border, the Canadian border, and there's not many people crossing the border in violation of law. He's got a Canada thing. And he did say, I think, over the weekend that they should be the 51st state again. One last thing I want to say is anybody who voted for Donald Trump out there, we'd like you to call. When he said repeatedly, prices are going to go down on day one, and every economist in the world, except maybe one who works for him, says prices are going to go up because of these tariffs. Does that concern you at all? The Wall Street Journal editorial page, the dumbest trade war ever is their description of this thing. The Wall Street Journal.
What Trump is going to say today, like you said before, is he got his 10,000 National Guard troops at the border in Mexico. They quaked under his threats. We're not going to have them, at least for a month, and I have won. My negotiating skills are superior, and I have won.
Now, let me just say, this is one of these things where Margie and I are into different things today. I would like, for the next few minutes, to talk to you about your reaction to the tariff announcements. Margie would like to know if you have any cousins in Toronto, and if they're nicer than your cousins in the United States. So you can call about either thing, and we'll try to.
I just don't know why we want to pick on one of our longest, staunchest allies, Canadians.
Because he can. That's why, to show how tough and macho he is. Yeah. Even if it causes prices to go up and the stock market, which 50% of Americans are invested in, to go down. Zach in York, you're next on Boston Public Radio. Thanks for calling, Zach. Hi.
Hi. So I think you're missing a big part of the picture here.
What is
He's a felon.
Yeah, he is a felon.
Right.
He's a criminal. And a criminal would be the extortionist in chief. That's what he's doing. That's what he's going to do for 4 years. He will extort the world. When he's done extorting the world, he will go state by state and extort every single state. That's what he's doing. It's pretty obvious.
I have to say, I think your point is well taken. I think that because everything is transactional with this guy.
It's the Trump meme coin. I'm sure there was a big investment from Mexico suddenly happened about an hour ago.
Well, Zach, let me just say, even when things don't improve or he isn't able to extort something, he will say that he was able to exact huge concessions from country X, even if they didn't happen. So, but you make a fine point. Thanks for the call.
He wants the optics of a win.
Yes.
Which is nonsense.
Whether it's a win or not.
He is profiting in some way, undoubtedly.
Well, that's probably another good point, Zach. Thank you for your call.
Here's an interesting theory. If Trump really cared about drugs, he wouldn't have pardoned the Silk Road guy. And remember that happened last week. And Silk Road is a mechanism for people to get all sorts of illegal drugs online. The guy was he serving a life sentence? I think it might have been close to it.
I'm not sure. Yeah.
But anyway, he's not serving it anymore because he was pardoned along with the people who tried to kill police officers. Lance in the car, thank you for calling.
Hello, Lance.
Hi, thank you for taking my call. Good morning. I'm on my way back to Maine. I'm pretty liberal, and I listened to your show in the past, but I don't think anyone can argue that putting tariffs to reduce drug flow coming north and reduce American arms going south is a bad thing. And the other point I wanted to make.
No. Well, let's stop there, Lance, and then you can continue. Yeah, how you achieve those things? You talk to your long-term ally and say, let's reduce drugs from going north and weapons from going south. You don't threaten to destroy their economy and ours to get what you want. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would agree, but 2% on the stock market, and Americans aren't changing our spending habits over that.
But Liz, do you think Mexico is going to be able to do this? Do you think they're going to be able to stop drugs from coming over the border, even with 10,000 national security people? I don't believe it.
I think this is the start of a conversation and negotiation, and that it highlights the problem that no one's been working on, the Biden or the Trump or the Obama administration.
Lance, let me say it again. In my lifetime, when you have a problem with an ally, a close ally, you work with them. You don't threaten them. You don't threaten to bring down their economy and yours to achieve your goals. So we agree with you that the goals, at least on the southern border, are admirable and important in both directions. But what kind of taste do you think this is going to leave in the mouth of Claudia Sheinbaum, the new president of Mexico, that she's getting threatened by her former ally to the north? I mean, the goal.
I hear what you're saying. I think it's a little hyperbole. I don't think it's that extreme. It takes a little bit of maneuvering, and we do this and they do that, and we'll see how this plays out. But I don't think it's going to be that bad. And I'm not someone who voted for Trump.
That's fine. No, that's fine.
Lance, I have just one more question. How do you feel about avocados and guacamole?
Yeah, it's not going to change my world.
Political point of view.
All right.
Hey, Lance, that was a good call. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much for the call. 877-301-8970. We're talking about the tariffs. I think in many people's minds, the worst of which have just been suspended for a month. I think Mexico was much more concerned.
Well, cars and lumber are real serious problems in terms of Canada. But, is there any reason to think in the next, whatever it is, I assume midnight is when it's supposed to start. I know it's tomorrow. In the next 12 hours that, other than his antipathy for Trudeau, and I agree with you, there seems to be an antipathy there. Is there any reason to think he won't cut a deal with them too?
I don't know. We'll see. But I suspect what's going to happen is a month from now, he's going to announce that there is no more fentanyl coming into the United States.
I'm sure.
And
because of his threat to Mexico.
And that won't be true, but he's going to say that. And obviously what we've learned, unfortunately, is that people believe what he says. He's a very effective con man. Bill from Ashland, thank you for calling.
Hello, Bill.
Hi, guys. I'm sorry, I have a little bit of a cold. But,
it's okay.
What I wanted to say was I'm actually hoping the tariffs go through, although I doubt that he's going to do. I think he's going to back off. And the reason is because in the last election, it seemed like everyone was the price of eggs, the economy. It's the economy, stupid. And I think the only way we get rid of these guys is if the economy tanks. And I know it's not, it's not the thing everyone wants, but other than that, I don't see any other way that they leave.
Well, I have to say, I it's easy. I don't know what your economic situation is, but it's easier for a lot of us who probably could deal with the additional cost generated by the tariffs to say that. But for people who are right on the edge, additional costs of living on critical things is a tough nut to crack, even if it achieves your ultimate goal. You know what I mean? It's sort of the blood in the street kind of thing. Some of us can afford the bleeding, and some of them, Bill, some of us, those who are going to suffer the worst, frankly, can't. But I hear you. Thank you very much for the call.
Here's a text. I work for a major brewery in New England, and one of the largest suppliers of grain for beer comes from Canada. Canadian aluminum is also the source of most cans used in the industry. Those tariffs are going to cripple an already struggling sector. So that person underscores the problems that could come from Canada. Thanks for the text. We're talking about tariffs, what you think. One of them is suspended, the ones from Mexico ones on Mexico for a month, but they're still there from China, electronic goods, obviously, and they're still there involving Canada. 877-301-8997. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, streaming on YouTube.
Indonesian officials have been in tense negotiations with Apple. They've given the iPhone maker an ultimatum: build more factories here or we'll ban sales of your phones. But some Indonesians already have plans to get around any ban.
There is a lot of crazy stuff that people do to get an iPhone here in Indonesia.
That story next time on The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And Safety Insurance, offering auto insurance policies designed to help for when the worst happens. You can ask an independent agent about safety insurance. Safety Insurance. We'll help you manage life's storms. And The Cambridge Homes, a nonprofit independent and assisted living residence proudly serving the Cambridge community and local seniors for more than 130 years. Learn more at thecambridgehomes.org/tradition.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Margery and Jim Browdy, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We're back at the library tomorrow, Wednesday, and Friday. The Governor Healy, will join us from 1 to 2. China, Mexico, and Canada account for more than 40% of all trade with the U.S. Supermarkets on Sunday were full of people bracing for change. We want your thoughts on the tariffs that are to go into effect tomorrow, unless something changes. That's China and Canada. And Mexico, should it happen after this 30-day pause. And I want to play for you. If you're a supporter of Donald Trump, you are really welcome here. How are you squaring this circle? Reminder, here he is at a press conference in August, butted up against comments he made yesterday at Joint Base Andrews. Here it is.
Grocery prices have skyrocketed. When I win, I will immediately bring prices down starting on day one. We may have short-term a little pain, and people understand that.
Little pain yesterday. I'm going to bring down prices on day one, and I'm assuming, if history is any guide for Donald Trump voters, that's perfectly fine. By the way, the caller earlier said that the Biden administration wasn't working on curbing drugs with China. You know, part of the reason maybe this isn't such a bad idea. Well, our colleague Zoe was checking out the Washington Post. Here's a story. China has collaborated with the U.S. on fentanyl issues. Under the Biden administration, D.C. and Beijing set up a counter-narcotics working group, a rare bright spot in an otherwise tense diplomatic relationship.
And we did have fentanyl-related overdoses falling by more than a quarter in the year ending in October 2024, according to the Centers for Disease Control. I don't know if their website is still up, but anyway, that's what they said.
And by the way, let's be clear. Obviously, if the fentanyl coming across the southern border can be reduced, obviously everybody supports that. The question, as I said to one of the earlier callers, is the way you do it by beating your allies over the head with a stick, or trying to sit down. This is the greatest negotiator of all time. Maybe you can negotiate it without causing misery. And by the way, the fact that this is gone in a day doesn't, you read stories this weekend. Restaurateurs, we'll talk to Corby Kummer about that. Supermarkets, families, everybody was in a high anxiety over what was coming. And the good news, part of this will not come at least for a month, if ever.
Michelle from Boxford just texted Jim.
What?
To say, to answer Marjorie's question, I have cousins in Montreal.
They're
they
nicer?
Are indeed very nice. We've been in daily contact, watching things unfold. We're all terrified. Her Canadian cousins have offered to help if we need to get out of the country, and she's researching.
Well, I didn't want to
dual
get into this,
citizenship.
but as you know, I go to Montreal most Christmases.
That's right.
I didn't go to Christmas 1 year ago. I met a real a-hole in Montreal. Just one, but a really bad person. Nicole in Dorchester, you're next on Boston Public Radio with Marjorie Egan and me, Jim Browdy. Hi.
Hi, my name's Nicole. I'm in Dorchester. I've lived here for 15 years, but I'm Canadian. I grew up in Canada.
Oh, great.
I grew up about an hour outside of Toronto, and my family and friends are there, and I'm devastated. I feel sick to my stomach, and, it's just like my brother's livelihood, they're at risk. It's just really awful, and I think who I actually blame most is Congress for giving the Mad King this power, and then for not being able to pass anything to stop this. Like, why does somebody just willy-nilly can decide one day that they want a 25% tariff on our neighbors? I don't know if you saw Trudeau's speech, but
I did.
It was really amazing in terms of, we have to be friends at a necessity here. So
yeah,
Nicole,
it's really devastating.
Speaking of devastation, when a Canadian hears Donald Trump say for the 300th time, they should just be the 51st state, what kind of reaction do you hear?
I mean, who wants that? Who's asking for that? Why do that? Everything is working out fine. And I think, I don't know if it was David Axelrod or somebody had said that, we do that and this is going to be a democratic, country. I just don't know. Nobody wants that. Indians don't want that. Americans don't want that. We're fine with it as is. And, Canada's a different country. It's a different people. It's a different history. And we're friends. I just don't know why we
were friends.
Why we would do this.
Nicole, you mentioned that relatives were worried about their businesses. What kind of business are they in?
Yeah, sure. So, an example, my brother just works for a company that does infrastructure, and today the Premier of Ontario, they're going to cancel contracts with American contractors.
Yeah.
So just projects are going to slow. Friends who have small clothing companies and sell to Americans. It's things like that. It's going to be the Canadian dollar. It's our number one trading partner. I just don't know why are we here?
Neither we. Nicole, that was an excellent call. Thank you for making it. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, we're going after one of our closest allies. It seems very odd.
Did I say this before? 30% of our lumber comes from Canada. And steel is an issue,
a lot
too.
Of steel.
That's right, yeah.
Paula in Franklin, thank you for calling.
Hello, Paula.
Hi. I had a quick comment about the fentanyl and also the troops he sent down there. Mm-hmm. In the bill that he killed, there were fentanyl detectors, and it's been estimated that 3,000 people had died since then at one point. And
well, you mean the bill that was killed at the end of the Biden administration?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Yes,
okay.
What he's doing, and he's doing everything in that bill one at a time. So he sent 1,500 National Guardsmen down, National Guards people down there when they were going to hire 1,500 new Border Patrol. But listening to everything you guys have been talking about, I researched what the effects of those tariffs on China that he did on China. First of all the companies that he thought were going to bring their business back here, they all went to other countries besides China that had equally cheap labor and equally lax laws. So it didn't bring in any business back here. It practically destroyed some business sectors. I know some of them were farming. And what he ended up having to do was to give them subsidies, because it destroyed these industries so much.
Are you talking about Trump? You're talking about Trump?
Yes, his first tariff.
First round of tariffs.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
What he did in the election was he kept saying, but Biden kept the tariffs, but Biden kept the tariffs. That's because Biden had so many other things that were really successful that he was working on that were very complicated, like the trade for the to get the hostages back, getting us out of the pandemic. They actually lowered the murder rate. They actually lowered the number of people, as you know, coming over the border. But the tariffs on China have done nothing positive and a lot of negative things to us. And that's China. Now we're going to do this to Canada and Mexico. I mean, we're just screwed. And Justin Trudeau, I don't know if you heard him. I think you did. He is PO'd about this. And he didn't know what. All he said was there's going to be retaliation. So I have a feeling that it's going to be really hard to restore our trade with them once Trump destroys it.
Paul, that was an extraordinary.
Called,
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
The other gentleman who called, who said we need to get these nuts out. My response to people who are all panicky like that is, we're going to flip Congress in the midterms, just like we did before. So he's going to have less power. He's still going to execute all of these executive orders, and the Supreme Court, of course, is going to allow a lot of them. I mean, we can't count on the Supreme Court anymore like we thought. And his lawyers are looking for loopholes.
You know, Paula, I don't. Your prediction about the midterms follows history, obviously. However, even if you're right and history holds, 2 years is a long time. This has only been 2 weeks, 14 days, and there's been a lot of chaos and a lot of pain. So I don't know if most people can wait that long. But Paula, it was an excellent call. Thank you so much for making it.
I don't know if we mentioned this before, but in case we didn't, in addition to electronics like cell phones, TVs, laptops, video game consoles, I didn't know China was a major exporter of things like toys and shoes. As well. You do see a lot of things made in China, but I didn't know they were making shoes anyway. Okay, let's go to Kath.
No, we're
out of time?
We are out of time.
We are out of time. I'm sorry to the people that we didn't get a chance to talk to, but thank you for your calls. We're going to come up in just a...
we're going to also talk about... The tariff issue is going to come up vis-a-vis restaurants and things like that with Corby Kummer in the 12 o'clock hour, so please stick around for that.
But after a quick break, we're going to talk with 3 women behind the Reconnect program at Boston Medical Center. That's the hospital where Catherine Barnett, our frequent guest who's a physician, works. They're studying the mental health impact there and the physical impact of racism, sexism, and LGBTQ discrimination, which obviously is kind of on the... Well, a lot of those programs are getting cut right now. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
I'm Jared Bowen. Today on The Culture Show, dance, music, and puppetry converge to tell the brutal story of war. The Life and Times of Michael Kay, a theatrical adaptation of J.M. Coetzee's award-winning novel, lands in Boston by way of Arts Emerson. Plus, Courtney Swain, the adventurous composer, sound artist, and musician from Japan, joins us for an in-studio performance ahead of her Celebrity Series concert. Tune in for that and more on The Culture Show today at 2 on 89.7 GBH.
Support for GBH comes from you. And Flour, Joanne Chang's bakery with 9 locations in Boston and Cambridge, delivering Valentine's Day sweets like a cake for 2 or sweetheart cookies. Orders accepted through February 9th. flourbakery.com/valentines-day. And Mass General Brigham Health Plan, ranked number 1 in member satisfaction among commercial health plans in Massachusetts by J.D. Power for the 2nd consecutive year. Details at mgbhp.org/everyday.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marjorie Egan, Jim Bradley. We're streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Back at the library tomorrow, Wednesday, and Friday. And on Friday, Governor Healy will join us for an hour in person for Ask the Governor. That'll be from 1 to 2 on Friday. We've talked a lot on the show about the relentless drumbeat against diversity efforts from the highest levels of government, the immigration actions spreading fear in communities around the region, and the racism people of color face in their daily lives. The weight of this kind of environment isn't just political, it's personal, taking a toll on those who feel it most. For the next segment, we're going to zoom way in and focus on one program working through this current moment of normalization of hate on the ground right here in Boston. Reconnect is a Boston Medical Center pilot designed to help people of color process and manage the mental health impacts of racism. BMC partnered with churches in Roxbury and Milton to launch it, and we're joined now by the program's co-developers, BMC clinical psychologist Nuha Alshabani and Sarah Valentine, along with Dr. Devin Brodrick, psychiatrist at BMC and First Lady of the 12th Baptist Church. Welcome to all three of you. It's great to have you. We appreciate it.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you very much for coming in. So, Sarah, let's start with you. Elaborate a little bit on what Jim said. What are you doing over there with these mental and physical effects of all this at BMC?
Sure. So I am the director of a program that focuses on expanding access to PTSD treatment in our communities. And some of the work we've been doing is expanding the way we think about trauma to integrate oppression-based stress. And so we have been partnering with each other and with the communities that we work with closely to develop a program that specifically targets oppression-based stress and the effects of oppression on individuals.
And what do you see? What are you hearing? I'm sorry, I can't see over the top of my computer.
Hello, Nuha.
Yeah.
What she's
What do you hear from people? And also, what do you hear from people at church? But let's start with you, Nuha. What do you hear from? What kind of stories?
Yeah, so patients have talked about a variety of experiences of racism that they've had in Boston, including folks who've lived through the busing experience here in Boston, racism that they experience within the hospital setting, workplace.
What do they experience in the hospital setting?
Yeah, just different experiences of feeling like discrimination from providers or the institution as a whole, low access to resources, things like that, and feeling that often their health is talked about outside of the context of racism and feeling that that really does impact their health and wanting a space where both of those can be addressed.
Doctor, how did the church connection, well, I guess in your case we know, but how did the church connection come about and why?
So, Yes, you kind of heard my story. So as I started psychiatry residency at Boston Medical Center, my husband was also getting into his role at 12th Baptist Church, Willie Brodrick II. And always been interested in just like intersections between those two, and hearing similar stories from people at church, knowing that their health is important, knowing that they're dealing with, yes, racism, but also just like mental health in general, seeming very ominous, knowing that it's an issue, not sure where to go. And there's also that stigma. People kind of felt comfortable talking to me about it because they knew what I did, but not really others. So that's when around 2020 I actually started working with Dr. Valentine, getting mentorship on how to do a community partnered project and really getting more conversations around mental health happening in the church setting. And then as we started to have those conversations, we had more conversations about the effects of racism as well. Thinking historically about racism in Boston, a lot of people transplanted from the South, so, experiences of segregation and how that affects now to our current experiences when the program was really popping off. This was like George Floyd time.
Sarah, I was just going to ask you, because we talk a lot about this with how few physicians are African Americans. I would imagine it's not that much different in psychiatry. And so, in the
5% range is the answer.
5% range. Mm-hmm. So I could see how if you are a African American talking to a white doctor, I don't like talking to men doctors, and I'm a woman. I'm a white woman, obviously. You want someone that can relate to your experience, and I don't think generally you can find that.
No, and it's interesting. When you speak to people about what they're looking for, they want somebody who understands.
Yeah.
So, like, yes, people are always trying to find black doctors. It's hard for me to find black doctors, but as long as you can find somebody who you feel like understands, it helps.
Empathetic.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, Sarah Valentine, I assume you almost have to be an idiot. One almost has to be an idiot to not think that overt racism affects people's mental health. But what's the reason? I assume there's a body of research also. What specifically does it show that supports the work you guys are doing?
Yeah, so we sort of think about oppression and discrimination as being on the same continuum of other types of interpersonal harm. And so for that reason, we conceptualize oppression-based stress as being part of a trauma continuum. So you might see experiences of trauma and discrimination leading to symptoms similar to post-traumatic stress disorder. For example, shifts in beliefs around safety and trust, ways in which persistent oppression can lead to lower self-esteem or self-worth that might really affect person's full worldview, but also leave them more vulnerable to develop depression, anxiety, and
Is it more damaging the younger you are? I'm guessing that if you're a school kid and you're experiencing this for the first time, you're not as resilient as maybe an adult who's had to accept this is the horrible way of the world,
Yeah, part of socialization is, young Black children are socialized to prepare and expect racism in a lot of settings. And so they're learning that from the older generation who is able to develop strategies and coping skills to be able to respond.
So, Nuha Alshabani, what exactly do you do to address what does the program do to address the problems all three of you have been identifying for us?
So we have a couple of different components.
Can you?
Yes.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Yeah. Can you hear me now? Okay.
Perfectly.
So one of them is psychoeducation, and so we're talking about things that folks have experienced in their everyday life, but providing more language for what might you call this. For example, folks have experienced microaggressions, but might not have heard that term before. And we use that education piece to provide a framing of externalizing these harms. As Sarah mentioned, like one of the symptoms could be negative self-stigma or negative thoughts about yourself. So really locating like where the problem is. And then we also provide coping skill education and practice. So what to do when one of these things might happen, how to keep yourself safe, how to get through that moment, how to manage the stress, as well as mindfulness activities, storytelling, which helps with building support within the group, which folks have felt really leads to validation, normalization, and getting support from their peers.
And does this work? I mean, I assume obviously if it didn't work, you wouldn't be doing it.
Yeah.
But what are the results? What are you producing?
Yeah, so our preliminary results, so we've run 3 groups, 2 at Boston Medical Center and 1 at 12 Baptist Church, has found significant improvement pre-post group in trauma symptoms of discrimination, ability to cope with stress, as well as mental health stigma. So we're seeing those all improve in the right direction. So mental health stigma going down, the impacts of racism going down, as well as more feeling like you can cope with those stressors.
We're talking to BMC clinical psychologist Nuha Alshabani and Sarah Valentine, as well as Dr. Devin Brodrick, a psychiatrist at BMC, about this program, Reconnect.
Yeah, speaking of this program, this has not been a good week for programs like this, good 2 weeks. So are you worried about, I mean, BMC serves a lot of people without insurance, or they're on Medicaid, or they're Mass Health or something. It depends a lot on the government. Are you worried about this?
Yes. So, BMC is an equity-led institution, and all of us here would consider ourselves health equity-focused clinicians and researchers. And this is a really hard time to be in that space.
Yeah.
And, what we've been doing is kind of taking a note from our own book, which is to organize and connect with colleagues, to regroup. I think it's really hard at this moment to know what to respond to and how to respond. But we are, I think, really forming our own community around that.
Did you hear many discussions about this at church this Sunday?
Oh, absolutely. My husband loves preaching about this stuff. He is a social justice focused minister.
Good for him,
He takes
because
it very
sometimes
seriously.
you don't hear about this in church, and it drives me crazy.
My husband would say this was literally what the gospel of Jesus is all about.
So wait. I want to get back to this where you used Sarah Valentine used the word regroup, but we're going to talk to Khalil Gibran Muhammad at 1:00, and we've talked a lot to him about higher education, where there is not regrouping, there is like full speed retreat with a couple of exceptions. Anything you can do to pretend like you don't. Well, maybe they don't pretend because they never cared about it to begin with. They care about equity kinds of things. This is a real threat. I'm guessing that BMC gets some federal money, and if they do, Donald Trump is not only not above, but is enthusiastic about threatening. So do you worry about the future of a program that's targeted to people of color? I wish we had people are watching the doctor's face as I answer that question. Are you going to answer that, Sarah Valentine, instead?
I'll take that one.
Oh,
yeah.
is there an agreement in advance that you'd take that question?
I mean, I think overall, BMC is a mission-driven hospital focused on equity. And so I don't think there's going to be a hard pivot on that commitment. I do know that we also rely on federal dollars. And so that's what I mean by regrouping, because how do we find a path forward, knowing that we're going to have to be far more diverse in the ways in which we get resources to do this type of work.
How about the issue that Marjorie raised a few minutes ago? Michael Curry is with us every week, and Michael from the League of Community Health Centers, as you know, was the convener of this health equity effort at the State House, which has legislation and other other things. It seems to me this falls neatly into that bucket. Does it not? I mean, this need that you're attempting to address, Sarah Valentine?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Yeah, but get back to the church for a second, because, people often, Sunday, if you have coffee or donuts or whatever, or just people hang out, what's the gossip? What's the mood?
You mean in church?
Yeah, or after church when people are talking to each other, or talking to you, or talking to your husband.
Honestly, I would say a couple of things. I think the message that we keep getting back to, because again, this is like a historically Black church. We've been through this before as a people. We've been resilient and overcome a lot of these sorts of issues as a people, rooted in our faith, and we plan on continuing to do the same thing. It's one of the reasons why I'm really glad that we're marrying a lot of the work in Reconnect with the church, because we know that there's infrastructure in churches that can help carry on some of this work. It might make it more difficult otherwise.
We just heard about the stigma before, Nuha, about Alshabani, about the stigma, and the stigma attaches sadly around mental health broadly in our society. It's not just in one piece of society, but how do you work to overcome that here to make sure that this successful program, as you described the results, is even something that people are willing to put their toe into,
Yeah, so a whole year before we launched the first group, we had been working with the churches to co-develop the intervention. And so...
Because that's where trust pre-exists. Okay,
yeah. And even within those spaces, we still had to build trust. I mean, folks know Dr. Cromartie, but Sarah and I were new. And so we did a lot of coming and listening and trying to understand what are the things that people need, what are they looking for, what are they concerned about, how would they conceptualize well-being, what would that look like for them, and to integrate that into the program that we developed. And at each step of the way, they were involved in designing the curriculum, picking the measures we use to evaluate, sharing it with the broader community. They had oversight and involvement and partnership and all of that.
When you talk, you use the word oppression a few times, Sarah Valentine, and the oppression that you're attempting to, and its impact on mental health you're attempting to address, obviously has existed almost forever. But what's the impact when it's not just in typical places like your workplace or your community, but when the most powerful person in the world is engaged in, I think most of us, I'm not speaking for you three, but I think DEI, his attack on DEI is just a cover for racism. Mm-hmm. And it seems to me it's hard enough to live in this world with the racism that pre-existed Trump, and all of a sudden you have a leader of the free world who is practicing it every day. What's the trickle-down impact of that on your work?
So we think about the impact of oppression as concentric circles, right? The middle is the individual, and then you have family, community, and then all the way out to sort of the geopolitical climate. And any oppression enacted at those different levels will impact the individual. And so it's just additional stress, compounding stress, and also potentially fewer avenues to address that type of stress because we already know that there are large workforce shortages in areas that are predominantly communities of color. And so you really are just exacerbating that problem.
How are you dealing with the resource issue? I mean, you mentioned there were three, you call them workshops, or three settings in which you've looked at the results. Is the person power there, or the resources there to serve the need, or is it limited like everything else is?
It's limited. We've been working hard to integrate the Reconnect program into usual care, so just being offered as part of our clinical programming. And Dr. Cromartie can talk a bit about sort of how to continue it in the church setting, but just to say that the future is a little bit uncertain in terms of funding for ongoing resources to continue this work.
Do you want to mention how to continue it in the church setting? Because I have another church question after that.
Yeah. So essentially what we've been working on in general, too, is getting wellness ministries up at each of our partnering churches. So it's 12th Baptist Church, St. John's Missionary Baptist Church is a little bit down the road, and then Roxbury Presbyterian.
What do you mean by wellness ministry?
Ministries, it's interesting. So, yes, mental health, but really our people like to think about health as a holistic thing. So yes, mental health, but this is also related to my physical health and my spiritual health. So using the word wellness sort of to capture all of it, and using, again, a ministry at a church, a really sort of baked in point in the church infrastructure as a place to continue this work.
If you're talking, go ahead, Margaret.
I'm just going to ask the church because I'm obsessed with this. We talk a lot about white evangelicals have kind of taken over the whole political scene. Their power is tremendous.
If you don't listen to the show, Marjorie's about to go off. Let me tell you.
And we have two reverends we talk about this with, and Black evangelical church is much more into social justice. There's whole swaths of the Catholic Church that is big into social justice, that isn't talking constantly about birth control and LGBTQ stuff, but they are talking about social justice issues and immigration. It seems to me that to make at this particular time, it would be great if there was some kind of fusion between the social justice crusaders in the Black evangelical church and the ones in the Catholic Church, or mainline Protestantism that is not hooked up with these people that have made a cross equivalent to the American flag in terms of the symbolism there. Yeah. Did anyone talk about that?
Yeah, you.
Go on. So there was just so much there. So much there. What I hear you saying is essentially that a lot of the social justice-minded churches could come together to streamline some of that work.
Or be a political force.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You think that could happen?
I think it should.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so Sarah Valentine, if people want to help so that the resources aren't quite so limited, can they volunteer? Can they contribute? How do they find out more about the program? What do they do?
Sure. So all contributions have to be done through BMC, so they can contact BMC.
And can you say I wanted to go to this program when you contact BMC?
Yes, you can. Okay. Yeah, they centralize that. So if folks wanted to donate to our services, we'd be so happy.
Great.
And also, we'll go through them, and then they can direct it to our program.
How about if people want to help with the work? Can they do that, or you need to be have the kinds of degrees that the three of you have?
A little training probably be a good idea.
Well, I'm sure, but can an average person who cares deeply about the issue, could they volunteer in some capacity?
One of the things that we're hoping to explore as we continue to gather data on the program to demonstrate that it's finalized and effective and ready to disseminate is to partner with folks in community. This is not a program based in pathology. It doesn't need to live in a hospital or clinical space. It can live and be run by community folks. So I think at that point of dissemination, we would be happy to turn it over.
Okay, and third and last thing, how do you find out more? How do you get more information if you want more information? Is there a website or is it on the BMC site? How do you find out?
You can look at bmc.org and search for Restore. That is the umbrella program for traumatic stress, trauma and stress-related disorders, and then this is part of the programming in Restore.
Great.
Well, thank you very
much,
to all
three of you. It's great.
For coming in. We much
great.
appreciate it. We have been
more smart conversation about community issues is up ahead with Jim Braude and Marjorie Egan on Boston Public Radio. Right after a news update from NPR. Stay with us here on GBH 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you. And McLean Middleton, a regional law firm with over 100 attorneys and locations in Woburn and Boston, serving clients for over 100 years in the areas of corporate law, tax law, litigation, and estate planning. McLean.com. The antiques market is heating up at the Las Vegas Springs Preserve. But will any lucky treasures hit the jackpot? Guess the top find on Antiques Roadshow tonight at 8 on GBH2.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH, HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News, what matters to you?
I'm Jim Braude, head on Hour 2, Boston Public Radio. Donald Trump is doubling down on his isolationist promises, cutting global aid, ending decades of humanitarian support for developing nations. That and more in our Global News Roundup with GroundTruth Project's Charlie Sennott.
I'm Marjorie Egan. Then is food and policy analyst Corby Kummer on how TikTok and other video apps have changed our approach to cooking, making it easier to venture out of our kitchen comfort zones and try something new. And aspiring health secretary RFK Jr. vows he's not coming for our Big Macs. More quick bites to come ahead on the second.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Amy Held.
Hours before a midnight deadline, U.S. tariffs on Mexico are on pause for 1 month. After President Trump spoke with Mexico's president, for its part, Mexico says it will also pause tariffs on the U.S. and reinforce its U.S. border to tamp down on drug trafficking. Trump says negotiations with Mexico continue, and he looks forward to achieving a deal without providing details. He says he will speak again this afternoon with Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. The U.S. tariffs on all Canadian and Chinese goods ranging from 10 to 25% are still on. But Ontario Premier Doug Ford tells Fox News he hopes calmer heads will prevail.
We're your allies. We need to build a strong two nations, not fight each other. It benefits China. That's what it does.
Economists say the Trump tariffs would likely result in U.S. consumers paying more for groceries, electronics, cars, and more. USAID Washington headquarters are closed to workers today as tech billionaire Elon Musk, tasked by Trump, is working to shut down the agency that spends billions in federal humanitarian assistance around the world. Democrats say the Trump administration has no legal standing to dissolve the agency. NPR's Franco Ordonez reports Trump and Musk have used insulting language against USAID.
He and his team, do want greater control over the department or with the work that they do. They want greater control over the spending, and they feel that too much money is going to causes that are not in U.S. interests. Now, lawmakers are concerned. Democrats have actually warned that Trump cannot just shut down USAID on its own without going through Congress.
Aid organizations are reporting confusion over which programs must halt their life-saving work. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is in Washington and is set to meet with President Trump at the White House tomorrow. This as NPR's Jerome Sokolovsky reports from Tel Aviv. Talks on extending the ceasefire in Gaza go on.
Netanyahu is under pressure from some in his government to resume the war against Hamas, especially after its displays of force during recent hostage releases. Netanyahu spoke to reporters before boarding a plane to Washington. He talked about the peace treaties with Arab countries that the last Trump administration helped broker. And he said Israel's war against Hamas in Gaza and against Iran and its other proxies have redrawn the map of the Middle East.
But I believe that working closely with President Trump, we can redraw it even further and for the better.
Netanyahu is meeting first with Trump's Mideast envoy, Steve Witkoff, and then will talk to the president himself on Tuesday. Jerome Sokolovsky, NPR News, Tel Aviv.
Following Trump's decision to impose wide-reaching tariffs, markets have tumbled in Asia, Europe, and on Wall Street. This is NPR News.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. The ice skating community on Nantucket will gather this afternoon to honor those skaters who died in an air crash in Washington last week. A notice posted on the Nantucket Ice Facebook page says the brief gathering and moment of silence will begin at 3:35 p.m. and will be streamed on Live Barn, an app used by many rinks and figure skaters. 12 figure skaters and coaches returning from a development camp following the U.S. National Figure Skating Championships in Wichita, Kansas, were among the 67 passengers and crew on that flight. Gun control advocate and March for Our Lives co-founder David Hogue was elected vice chair of the Democratic National Committee on Saturday. The 24-year-old Hogue graduated from Harvard University in 2023. He's been on GBH before. According to the Crimson, he will serve as a major figurehead within the party, working alongside three other vice chairs and newly elected party chair Ken Martin. Writing on X after being elected, Hogue says, quote, "We need to build a Democratic Party that is authentic, relatable, earns people's trust, and wins again, and one that stops apologizing for being who we are." Unquote. In sports, it's all eyes on the Beanpot Hockey Tournament tonight. BU and Harvard have the early 5 o'clock game. Northeastern and BC have the 8 o'clock later game. And in the forecast, clouds, low 40s today, cloudy and upper 30s overnight. Sun, clouds, low 40s tomorrow, then sunny and 30 degrees on Wednesday. We could see some more precipitation on Thursday, according to Dave Epstein. Right now, 38 degrees in Boston. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Fisher Investments. Fisher's dedicated team of specialists provide resources on investing, retirement income, estate planning, and more. Learn more at FisherInvestments.com. Investing in securities involves the risk of loss.
He's Jim Browdy. I am Marjorie Egan. Welcome to hour number 2 of Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We are streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. And we're going to be back at the Boston Public Library tomorrow, Wednesday, and Friday. And Friday, we're going to be joined by the Governor of the Commonwealth, Maura Healey, from 1 to 2, taking our questions and yours. Hello again, Jim.
Hey, and we should just update you since we talked about tariffs for the first half hour and obviously told you about the, quote, pause for Mexico. Trump is speaking to Justin Trudeau this afternoon, so if things, who knows, go well for Americans, that is, hopefully there'll be a pause on Canada too, but we don't know. Joined now in Studio 3 by Charlie Sennott. Charlie's GBH News analyst, founder of the GroundTruth Project. You can follow his GroundTruth newsletter on Substack at Charlie Sennott, that is 2 N's, 2 T's, SENNOTT.substack.com. Hello, Charlie.
Hey, Jim.
How are you?
Marjorie.
So it's been a very, very busy 2 weeks in terms of domestic life, but also in foreign affairs. What do you make of all the changes and the edicts and the executive orders, et cetera?
Look, I think we're coming off one of the most extraordinary news cycles in history in 2024. And into 2025, we are suddenly and dramatically in one of the most pivotal times in our country's history. I don't think it's an overstatement to say that. I don't think we can possibly state strenuously enough how much is under attack right now and what's at stake. I think, really, truly, this is a time to do our jobs, to just stay fair, to listen, but to not also cower in front of the need to be clear and to say things clearly and to say things that I think we don't get kowtowed, we don't get distracted. I think of Trump's administration in these first few weeks as pro wrestling. They're throwing a script at us with all these guys' bodies are flying around and there's the face rake and the hammer and body slams. And it is interesting that the head of the Department of Education actually comes a former executive in worldwide wrestling.
Linda McMahon.
And that Trump's one of his dearest friends is her husband, and he's very involved in that world. This is real. We have to realize that's a script, and we should not pay attention to it, because then there's real stuff to pay attention to, and that's what we got to dig in on. So these days, on the world stage, huge economic hard power, not soft power, in the economic trade war that is now underway. I don't think you need anyone more powerful than the Wall Street Journal just to circle that headline. Dumbest trade war in history. Wall Street Journal. That's not the Marxists of the left, as Trump calls them. That's not the liberal media elite. That's the Wall Street Journal. And the stock market is the other one to pay attention to. And they're answering with really, for at least last time I checked, it was really going down.
It was way down before the Mexico pause, and then the numbers got a little bit better. I'll check as we're speaking. You know what strikes me most about the Trump's actions in the first 14 days, Charlie Sennott, by the way, it was down almost 600 when both Mexico and Canada were going to be subject to tariffs tomorrow, down 150 now, is we treat our allies and our so-called enemies exactly the same under Trump, if not worse with our allies. I mean, we couldn't be closer to any country than we are with Canada. We obviously have a major trading partner with Mexico, and his use of the stick to bring them to the table, if that's what the goal is a hell of a way to make and keep friends,
Good point. I mean, let's talk for a moment about the art of the deal, to quote the name of Trump's book, which his then author, who he put up to writing it for him, has come out and trashed him.
Totally. I know, I get such a kick out of that.
The book, The Art of the Deal, that was all happening when I was covering Trump. When I was at the New York Daily News, Trump was ascendant. He was this real estate mogul. The Art of the Deal made sense in that era of greed, the 1980s, that time of hardcore deal makers and real estate tycoons. He came out of that, and he was the hero of that screenplay. Remember Wall Street? Greed is good.
Of course.
That era is Trump's era. His sense of the deal is based on that. And I think he's trying to bring that to a global stage. A deal in which power speaks and hard power speaks louder than soft power. A deal in which, as he did in his real estate deals, when he builds a casino, he would not pay a contractor, and he'd tell him, I'll get to you when I can. And he'd talk him down because he knew he could go to the next contractor and talk them down and not pay them and work one deal against another and one shell game after another. He's a real estate tycoon. and he's a gambler. And I think that that is not how foreign policy works. There is no other Canada to deal with. So when you alienate Canada as a trading partner because you think you're a hardcore guy and you suddenly lob a 25% tariff right between their eyes, they're going to come back at you. And at some point, they may become disaffected and look elsewhere, like to China or to other global traders. And there are lots of big global trade organizations out there that they could be part of. I think we're undercutting our own strengths of a free and open market where soft power is an expression that through time has been more convincing than hard power. Joe Nye, Harvard University, our neighbor here, is the one who coined these phrases and who really articulates that. And I've learned from him about the difference between hard power and soft power. Both have a place. But
is USAID a good example of soft power?
I don't think you could have a better example of successful...
Humanitarian aid, essentially, to nations that really need it.
Right. And I don't think we could have a more successful example of soft power than USAID.
Explain what's happened in the last 24 hours.
So in the last
USAID.
24 hours, I mean, the Trump administration, specifically Doge and specifically Elon Musk are coming at USAID and saying they're going to shut it down. They're saying that it's going to be shut down. That is, from someone who's traveled around the world and looked at USAID programs, good, bad, and ugly, and there are all three, that's horrifying. John Kennedy started this idea of USAID at a time when the United States thought that soft power and service to the world was something that America stood for and wanted to be part of. He started the Peace Corps. He started USAID. Those are noble expressions of soft power.
By the way, vaccinations, clean water, those sort of things that not only are the right thing to do, but also create friendships and loyalties as opposed to creating fissures and disloyalty when you just abruptly cut off this money. And by the way, for whatever it's worth, which may be nothing, we'll see, the Democrats in Congress are saying he doesn't have the power to shut. Well, clearly Elon Musk doesn't have the power, but that Trump doesn't have the power, and obviously it'll be challenged should he go ahead with this. But as of the moment, that's their intention, to just shut this damn thing down.
And to put a little bit of meat on the bone, $40 billion, 10,000 employees. But my favorite expression of USAID, the one that I feel closest to, and watching Samantha Power, also our neighbor from formerly of Harvard University, is media, is the free press around the world. Independent media has been funded by USAID. I've watched what they've been able to achieve in places like Iraq, in places like the Middle East, and in Latin America, where the media is often co-opted by oligarchs, increasingly happening in our own country, but really, truly, one of the most noble things I think USAID has done is that free press. And I'm going to say that that is more important than ever. And we should never forget soft power after World War II. We showed hard power in World War II. We won, right? But the soft power was to say to Japan and Germany, who we defeated, you were addicted to a cult, authoritarian cult, dictatorship, Hitler and the emperor. Then we said, one of the ways we're going to get you off that drug of authoritarianism is with a free press. Because with a free press, you will have freedom of expression and you will have an ability to learn how to think for yourselves. And that'll be the best way to instill democracy and inspire change. And it worked. One of the strongest media ecosystems in the world is Japan and Germany. We did that. You know, USAID came in the early 60s, but we did that through that same idea that inspired Kennedy to create USAID.
So what is the bee in the bonnet Musk has got about USAID? He says it's beyond repair. We don't have an apple with a worm in it. He said we have a ball of worms. It's a ball of worms. So what's his problem?
I don't know. That's a tough question. I think I'd need to be more of a psychologist than a news analyst.
Okay, well, let me ask it this way.
Yeah.
We were talking with Jon Gruber earlier this morning, but heads the MIT's economics department, saying, does anybody think these tariffs are a good idea? No, nobody thinks so, unless they're a Trump sycophant. So is there this huge groundswell that I'm unaware of to get rid of USAID?
I think it'd be really interesting to ask Musk about the tariffs. Like, if I had a chance to ask him...
No, she's asking about this humanitarian...
AID.
Humanitarian I know you're asking about USAID, but then you threw in, like, this whole thing that's happening also with the tariffs. I'm saying to understand Musk, it might be interesting to ask him about tariffs, because I don't think he would be in favor of those.
Yeah.
I think he'd be strongly against them. He is someone who thrives in a global marketplace in which we have worked so hard to integrate economies across boundaries and
It's
across
not just Musk.
borders.
A lot of red states are hugely dependent upon trade.
Michigan. Could there be a more dramatic?
Right, exactly.
But the thing that's interesting about Elon Musk, I think, and this is counterintuitive and maybe even against the orthodoxy of the left, and it might even sound contradictory, but I think he is a big enough thinker and someone with enough of a sense of systems that we should be cheering for him to succeed in finding more efficiency in federal government. Now, if he continues to go in...
Well, he's got everybody's Social Security information now. Maybe if you take one step wrong, there goes your Medicare, your
By the
Social
way, Charlie is going to want to have that deleted from the rebroadcast later. So if you can see if we can...
I don't. You know why?
No, except his priorities. If you were in charge of government efficiency, there's a good chance that Margie and I would say, Charlie, good luck. Let us know what's going on. This guy doesn't believe in anything except personal aggrandizement and wealth.
All right. One of the columns I did for my first Substack was about being in Austin right after the election. And I actually took a tour of the plant, the mega plant or whatever they call it.
Yeah. Tesla, we're talking about.
The Tesla plant in Austin. Okay. It's jaw-dropping. It's breathtaking. It is efficiency writ large. It is one of the most incredible things I've seen since the pyramids. I mean, you look at it and you think this is amazing. You really need to see it to believe what's happening there. And I just want to say, all of us know, whether you're far left, you're far right, or anywhere in between. I don't know many people in America who wouldn't say the government bureaucracy is out of control. Spending is insane. I wrote a big series for the Boston Globe way back in 1996 or something that was about overspending in the U.S. military, the bloated example of corporate welfare.
Well, John Kerry's ad walking in the hardware store. He says this in the hardware store, the screw cost 32 cents. The Defense Department spent $160.
Why wouldn't we want to be on the side of the efficiency?
You got to be kidding. Okay, wait a second. Charlie, here is an example of what Doge and Elon Musk considers government efficiency. Let's shut down USAID, which provides humanitarian aid.
Absurd.
It's absurd, but that's his idea.
Okay.
We don't need that. And you know why we don't need it? Because most of the beneficiaries of those programs don't look like us. And they don't look like Elon Musk, and they don't look like...
Hold on. This whole thing he's just done, though. I mean, it's one thing to be a genius, and I think he is a genius about Tesla and stuff like that. He's a weirdo. I mean, how he has any kind of understanding of the Department of Education, or how scared people are about 6 college kids and Elon Musk getting into the treasuries without... He's not elected to dog catcher, to use a cliche.
Yeah.
I mean, I find that a little troubling.
I don't find it a little troubling. I find it distressing. And that's why I said when I introduced this comment that I knew would be controversial, that it might sound contradictory.
Yeah.
But with all due respect, don't you hate it when people say that?
It
usually means they're going to disrespect you.
Respect, right? Exactly.
When my kids say, Dad, all due respect, you know they're about to really insult you. But I want to just say, all due respect, if we keep thinking that this administration is just full of buffoons and racists and they keep showing themselves that way, we're all going to get nowhere. But there is a shared goal that I do think is worthy, which is efficiency of government. And I don't think it's bad to get there. And the last thing I'd say, I know I'm talking too much. I'm sorry. I had a lot of coffee today. But with all due respect, Jim?
Yes, with all due respect.
I do think it is a good time to listen carefully. The orthodoxy of Democrats and the left has failed for a long time. Wake up. Let's listen.
But the question is,
give it a shot.
Messenger?
Don't listen to the...
Fine. Okay,
Wait, can I make one last point?
Very quickly.
Okay. Don't listen to the pro wrestling script. Let's see if he really shuts down USAID. Let's see if this isn't just theater.
Well, I'm going to talk about this in a few minutes. A lot of people think it's just baloney and none of it's going to happen.
I think that may be.
You know, it's also just talking to those 1,600 people. He's never going to pardon the people who tried to overthrow the government of the United States. It's just idle talk, right?
Well, also
including the people who tried to kill cops. He's never going to do that.
What people who are talking about and the bloat in the bureaucracy are saying that what they'd be afraid of is someone going in systematically and looking at stuff. He's talking about just firing people.
Okay, can I go down a list in our remaining time of 3 major things happening in the international scene and get a quick response? One person who is not seen as a buffoon, to use your word, is Marco Rubio, who is confirmed by a narrow 99-0. His first job is to go to Central America and meet with the Panamanian president and say, give us the Panama Canal back now. Does it get any more insane than this? His argument, of course, you're looking at me like this is a good idea too?
Look, I don't think.
Go ahead.
No, I'm going to just say, I think, again, there is the theater of this, and then there is the practical realities. And I actually think Marco Rubio errs on that side of practical reality, and he can get outside.
What's the practical part of this?
That there could be a chance for the United States to get a better deal in Panama, and also to back China off the plate from trying to use it so much.
We bullied Colombia last week.
It worked.
I know, but that's a great way to do foreign policy. Right?
I'm not a
bullying Panama too. Yeah. I'm not saying there shouldn't. He's not talking about striking a better deal. Maybe that's what the end game is. He's talking about the United States seizing the Panama Canal if it turns out that the Panamanian president, who says absolutely not, is not reasonable. Let's move to the next one.
All right.
350,000 Venezuelans, temporary protected status for obvious reasons. If you're following anything that's going on in that country, I've told this before, a good friend of mine has parents who are there. It is so bad. Just one example, her mother needed surgery. She had to send the medical supplies from the United States to Venezuela through a circuitous route so her mother could get the surgery that she needed. 350,000 Venezuelans are going to be subject to deportation once this rescission happens. Unimaginable, right?
It is unimaginable, and it speaks to that wider topic we were talking about the ways in which hard power in global economics and in immigration policy can backfire on you. The fact is, our economy needs immigrants.
Totally
and the fact is, Venezuela, can you think of a country where there's a more clear case of asylum seekers than those coming out of the dictatorship that Maduro oversees, that we speak out against because he's a socialist dictator?
We recognize his opponent as the winner of the election, not just Biden,
we can't
but
take
Trump.
These people in who we need. And by the way, remember on Martha's Vineyard, we sat in the center of that crosshair when Governor DeSantis from Florida sent the 50 Venezuelans.
Thinking that the people of Martha's Vineyard would give them the finger.
And they were welcomed as they should be. Why? Because Martha's Vineyard, is where, by the way, I am, for all my sins, I am now the publisher of the local newspaper.
It's incredible. We
Someday
know that.
we'll
Martha's
talk about
Vineyard Times. No, I know it.
It's kind of bizarre, but I actually love going local right now. I think that's where it's at. You guys have always known that.
Yeah.
I do think these global issues are playing out locally. Can you think of a microcosm of immigration and inequity globally more than Martha's Vineyard? Yes, it is a liberal elite, but people don't know it's 20% of the year-round population are Brazilian immigrants. 40% in the schools, students speak Portuguese, Brazilian Portuguese, in the home as a first language.
Did you hear what Trump said this morning? Actually, he proposed selling Martha's Vineyard to Greenland. Did you know that? That's an odd proposal. Okay, I have one last thing for you.
If he would sell it to Ireland, I might say,
we got to do this. No. This is really important. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say the Martha's Vineyard thing to me doesn't teach us anything because it was for a short time, small number of people.
No, I'm saying writ large, Marjorie. I'm saying, okay, there's the Venezuelan thing, only 50.
Yep.
They were well cared for.
Yep.
But now you have a population on that island driven by the immigrant community that works as construction workers, as roofers, as carpenters. They're landscapers. They're restaurant owners and managers and waiters and dishwashers. The entire economy, like the American economy, relies on immigrant labor. And yes, there are great inequities. And yes, you can constantly point at it as this place of liberal elite and inequity. Or you could say, wait, it's actually a microcosm for the global economy that's interesting. And if we can't figure it out there, you can't figure it out anywhere.
Okay, by the way, CNN is saying that Secretary of State Rubio says he's the acting director of USAID.
A lot of our texters want to know if there's massive amounts of money laundering and inefficiencies at USAID, giving Musk an excuse for getting in there. That they have.
He's not talking about getting rid of inefficiencies. He's shutting it down.
I know.
That's the proposal.
I know it. But
if
that's what they're asking
if there's
about.
money laundering to USAID?
And terrible inefficiencies, and they're terrible about getting money to recipients.
See, look, I have sat there and watched U.S. aid, for example, in Ukraine, watching aid not get delivered. It is beyond maddening. It is heartbreaking to watch USAID fail, and they do fail. But they also do things right.
Yep.
And they do inspire through soft power. And I did watch programs for education and other programs work in different corners of the world. But the point is, yeah, it could be more efficient, but don't kill it. And folding it into the State Department now makes it political. It had protection. And the other thing really important to understand about USAID, it was the way American diplomats could actually get what they call beyond the wire, outside the gates of the embassy and out into the communities to hear, talk with people, learn, and try to deliver.
Okay, so we only have a couple minutes left. Last topic is Netanyahu is either on his way or he's in Washington. He's meeting with Donald Trump tomorrow. A week ago, Donald Trump wanted everybody in Gaza to go to Egypt and Jordan. The leaders of Egypt and Jordan said thanks, but no thanks. So if you could do a whole wrap in 90 seconds, the ceasefire appears to be holding, if that's, correct me if I'm wrong. Is Trump still proposing the evacuation of Gaza, I assume, so he could build a hotel on the water or something, or Kushner can, or something? What's the state of things, and what's going to come out of this Netanyahu
With
Trump
all
meeting?
due respect, Jim, you are dripping with cynicism. No, I
by
think,
the way, isn't it true that Kushner was talking about, no?
I don't know.
Okay, go ahead.
But I can tell you this. The Arab world will not accept the Palestinians in Gaza being sent to Egypt or anywhere else, because they know that that cancels their right of return as refugees. And it undercuts the entire goal of all of the Middle East and articulated in the architecture of the peace agreement, which Bill Clinton and Israel and the Palestinian leadership put together, that actually has a roadmap for how to resolve this, which is a two-state solution. If you undercut that by trying to say send them to Egypt, then you don't understand the Middle East. You don't know the hydraulics.
Before you continue, Jared Kushner at Harvard on February 15th praised this is according to The Guardian, praised the very valuable potential of Gaza's waterfront property and suggested Israel should remove civilians while it bulldozes the strip.
You make a lot of fancy hotels.
Look, they've bombed Gaza to rubble.
Rubble, I know.
So think of the amount of aid. Speaking of USAID, think of the amount of aid that's going to be needed to go in and rebuild that. And could there be a chance for an economic cooperative zone in which tourism is done? Because Gaza is bizarrely sitting in a beautiful spot. And when you watch the fishing boats off of Gaza, and there is a hotel that's Palestinian-owned hotel that I used to stay in there, and you'd eat fish on the deck, and you'd think, my editors have no idea that I'm actually in a pretty nice place right now. And I think there are opportunities there. It would be amazing to see. That's not what Jared's proposing. But the thing to watch in the Middle East, just to sum up, Jim, is incredible moment of opportunity. It is. It's destruction. It's rubble. It's horrific what happened there. It's barbaric, and there were war crimes committed for which people should be held accountable, starting with Hamas and then going into the IDF and the way it did what has to be described as indiscriminate bombing. But the thing that's shifted is that Israel now has defeated, to a large extent, both the leadership of Hezbollah and the leadership of Hamas. Now, they haven't put them both out of business. Just witness the guys with the machine guns in Gaza.
When they're releasing the hostages, you mean?
But the other thing that's really interesting to watch, I'll pivot and then I'll close, and that is in Saudi Arabia, to watch the new head of Syria go first to Saudi Arabia. Why is that huge? Because he didn't go to Iran. So Israel's success against Hezbollah and Hamas has weakened Iran to the point where the Assad regime fell in Syria, and Iran didn't do a thing because they couldn't, because Iran is severely weakened, which I got to say, if you care about human rights, that's good for the world. And I think when they're weakened, things could pivot to Saudi Arabia, and you could actually get that whole wider peace agreement with Saudi Arabia. And that's why I'm saying, look, it seems like the darkest days of rubble and despair, and there is so much of that there. But if good statesmanship can come through, if this team can wisen up, I think the Biden administration, ironically, has handed Trump an opportunity to do the work of peace.
So next time you're here, because we run out of time, you can describe to us why Elon Musk should be in charge of the Middle East, okay? So Charlie
I never said that.
Charlie Sennott, it's great to see you.
Great to see
so
you
much
both.
for your
With
time.
all due respect, Jim, it's really good to see you.
Okay, Charlie, thank you very much. We've been speaking with Charlie Sennott, GBH news analyst and founder of the GroundTruth Project. You can follow his GroundTruth newsletter on Substack at charlessennott.substack.com, charlessennott.substack.com. Charlie, thank you.
Thanks, Charlie. Good to see
Coming
you.
up after a quick break, we're going to talk about food with our food policy analyst, Corby Kummer of the Aspen Institute and Tufts. He's next on Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, broadcasting, or streaming, I should say, at youtube.com/GBH News.
Be welcome to one of the wonders of the world. Be welcome to the Panama Canal.
The Panama Canal. President Trump says we're taking it back, and his new Secretary of State is in Panama to push the case. Many locals are shocked.
That was something that we weren't expecting, in our 2025 bingo card. I'm
Ari Shapiro, hosting All Things Considered from the Panama Canal on NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And Central Square Theater, presenting Space, a new play about the Mercury 13 female pilots, their ancestors, and the national civil rights space race that has spanned our past century. Through February 23rd, centralsquaretheater.org. And Mass General Brigham Health Plan, ranked number 1 in member satisfaction among commercial health plans in Massachusetts by J.D. Power for the second consecutive year. Details at mgbhp.org/everyday.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marjorie Egan, Jim Braude. We're streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Back at the library tomorrow, Wednesday, Friday. Friday 1 to 2, the governor joins us in person at the library for Ask the Governor. Joined now on Zoom by food policy analyst, multiple James Beard winner, Corby Kummer. Corby is the executive director of the Food and Society Policy Program at the Aspen Institute, senior editor at The Atlantic, and a senior lecturer at the Tufts Friedman School of Nutrition, Science, and Policy. Hey, Corby.
Greetings from the Tufts Friedman School of Nutrition, Science, and Food Policy.
It looks
Thank you.
It looks
very,
it, actually. Yeah,
I
welcome.
got to get my Zoom on so I can see. There. So, Corby, I guess we can not worry about avocados and guacamole, and tequila for a while because we're going to have the suspension on these tariffs from Mexico for at least a month if they ever come back at all. But we still got to worry about maple syrup, I guess, from Canada. Or what do you hear from your restaurant business? The margins aren't great in that business to begin with.
Well, the restaurant business is incredibly worried about crackdowns on immigration and losing their entire workforce to scares. And I think we touched on a story the Times ran quoting Chicago restaurateurs as distributing guides to where the safe rooms are behind the scenes in restaurants because ICE officials need a warrant to get behind the scenes, but they can have random checks in the front of the house.
Oh.
To ask, we can't say Gestapo yet, but it's very scary tactics. As for tariffs, right, ingredient costs have gone way up. How the administration thinks that imposing tariffs on Canada and Mexico will do anything but raise everybody's grocery prices through the roof when they won and ran on high grocery prices is a mystery. But restaurant owners haven't been hit with this yet, so they don't know what's going to happen. They were much more alarmed about Mexico than Canada because of so much fruit and vegetable.
So I guess we could say for a while we're okay in that front in the restaurant business.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, but it's labor right now more than food costs.
Okay.
That's the concern.
Yeah, but it would seem to me, as someone who goes to restaurants, doesn't run one, you also have to plan for eventualities. And as of the moment, tomorrow Mexico is not happening. As of the moment, it's going to happen in 30 days. And you can't just wait till the 30 days is up and then, should it go into place, start worrying about where you get your fruits and vegetables and other things at affordable prices. So just the uncertainty, it seems to me, that's hanging over. I'm trying to think before we talk to you, of all the industries we talk about on this show, the one that's getting hit, it seems to me, from the most locations all at once in so many different ways is the restaurant industry. I mean, it's really not fully recovered from COVID. You mentioned how huge a percentage of their workforce is affected by his potential mass deportation, and now throw in these insane tariffs kind of thing. It's like in every direction they're getting it.
It's labor, It's also farming, because farming itself, that supply chain is going to be severely curtailed if farmers aren't able to find laborers to harvest their crops. So yes, restaurants are really facing it. I think what we'll see in the short term, if the Mexico tariffs go into effect, is just retooling of menus. Less berries and things that are grown and available only from Mexico in all the cold weather seasons.
So we had RFK Jr. on the witness stand last week. He wants to run the Health and Human Services in the country. And he's always talking about ultra-processed foods are terrible for you. And people say, oh, he's right about that. And that's true. But, I think we've been saying this for decades. I remember a million years ago, Adele Davis, she was born in 1904, writing these bestsellers about processed foods. And that was she was born in 1904. So we know this. I think the issue is the lobbyists for the food industry.
Well, before we get an answer, let's hear from RFK talking about himself and talking about RFK Jr. and who can solve the problem. Here he is.
We are allowing these companies, because their influence over this body, over our regulatory agencies, to mass poison American children. And that's wrong. It needs to end. And I believe I'm the one person who's able to end it.
We talked about this with Michelle Obama. She wanted to get rid of chocolate milk. She wanted to get rid of lousy food in the schools, and it was like she was doing a Marxist takeover of the schools. But anyway, how's RFK Jr. going to get around the power of the food lobbyists?
He's not. It's completely unrealistic.
Yeah.
And besides, he just doesn't have, what he would have to do would be to have the FDA start regulating ultra-processed foods. There's no agreed upon definition of ultra-processed foods. That's going to take so many years, let alone a new regulation, let alone the industry having its chance to spend billions or many millions fighting this. It's absolutely not going to happen. Nor would RFK Jr. have power over school lunch, because that's USDA's purview, and he's only going to have very limited influence through the FDA. So in the absence of any kind of agreed upon definition of ultra-processed food, I would say it's just not going to happen.
Before we get to the next topic, which Marjorie and I planned out, I wanted to say something to you.
What?
Well, I said it to you already. I'm going to say it to Corby. I cooked and ate something last night that I'd never even heard of until I was at Market Basket on Saturday. Cod cheeks.
Cod cheeks.
I didn't know what they were, but I bought them because they looked interesting. I looked them up, and cheeks from fish apparently are just that. The part of the fish between the eye and the jaw kind of thing.
Yeah, that's when they breathe.
And
they go out, little gulls.
Can you get the camera on Marjorie? There she is. We're watching her do it. That's very attractive. Now, let me just say this to you. Not only was it among the tastiest things I've ever cooked in my life, it was also among the tenderest things I've ever cooked in my life. Do people know about fish cheeks, or was I just missing out?
I am speaking to you from the Chinatown campus of the Tufts Friedman School of Food Policy and Nutrition. Yes, of course. The Chinese know completely about fish heads. It is a delicacy. If you see fish collar also on menus grilled, it is succulent and wonderful. One of the main reasons, just like loin meat of beef and other animals, is it's very tender. It's not a muscle that's used to swim or to use very often. So it's just sitting around there languishing for your eating pleasure, Jim, after they're slaughtered.
So does last question on this. I had cod cheeks. Does every fish, Marjorie doesn't eat fish, but is every fish...
I do. There's certain fish.
Well, some. Well, the ones that don't taste like fish is what you eat, like swordfish.
Right. About swordfish cheeks? What do we know about them?
So do all fish have cheeks that people eat?
Finfish have cheeks. I've never had swordfish cheeks, for example. I've only had a limited number of fish. Because for one thing, I think it's when the restaurants get in whole fish and they do the cutting and butchering themselves.
By the way, so I'm recommending cod cheeks at Market Basket. Just fabulous. Easy to cook, quick to cook.
Them and making them.
Well, I was very proud of myself, and I loved every minute. We're talking to Corby Kummer.
So tell us about the food trucks out in Los Angeles after those devastating wildfires.
This is one of those inspiring feel-good stories of a couple that changed careers and decided to go into Tropic Trucks was the name of their business, and they had about 4 of them by the time that their part of Los Angeles got hit by the fire. And so they swung into action. Their own home, after a couple of scares, lost, but they decided to mobilize their food trucks and start feeding first responders. It's a lovely and very long story that Tim Carman, who's a good features reporter for the Washington Post food section, wrote. What it really was like to me was the COVID response stories of people who are just primed to use their ability to make food and serve people to help rescue workers. And these people decided, we've lost what we can do, but we've lost what we've got, but we're going to join forces, in this case with World Central Kitchen. Jose Andres' World Central Kitchen was right on the scene in Los Angeles to help feed the rescue workers for the fire. They themselves, the couple that own these food trucks, were completely in an information blackout, a literal blackout, because I didn't realize how many of the fancy neighborhoods like Pacific Palisades, they still have overhead power wires, which is one of the main reasons that the fire spread as fast as they did. All of these exploding wires and transformers. So in any case, this couple completely lost their power, but they had food trucks and they served others instead of feeling sorry for themselves.
Okay, before we continue, I would like to ask both of you, that would be Marjorie Egan and Corby Kummer, to guess what I am looking at a photograph of on the internet as we speak. Either of you may guess.
Fish cheeks.
Well, yeah, but be more precise.
Not my cheeks, I hope.
Swordfish cheeks.
Swordfish cheeks.
So the answer, food expert Corby Kummer, is there are, in fact, swordfish cheeks, and I'll be purchasing them and cooking them as soon as I possibly can. I'd just like to make that announcement.
I think
right
blowfish cheeks would probably be the best, the way they really expand.
What is with cheeks. You and fish? What's the problem? But I never asked you. What's the problem?
I like the taste of it for the most part.
Okay, fine.
Okay, so, Chick-fil-A, Tom Menino a million years ago tried to keep Chick-fil-A out of Boston because he said they were lousy on LGBTQ stuff. Our staff looked it up. They seem to have done a little something, but not much. But this story is not about, it's how they cook things, that they're chicken sandwiches. But what are we supposed to think about Chick-fil-A, Corby Kummer?
First of all, Jim is rebranding them to Cheek-fil-A.
Cheek-fil-A.
It's a good one, thank you.
New business plan for them.
Yep.
This is a very long story in the Wall Street Journal. So long, it took forever to read.
Yes.
I kept thinking, who is devoting this much time praising Chick-fil-A's internal traffic control systems? Why it's the Wall Street Journal? Because they're a huge business success story. It's an interesting story. It's talking about monitoring all of the traffic at drive-through locations, which apparently began in McDonald's, 30 years ago? Or 30 years ago was the first double drive-through location at a single McDonald's. But an enormous percentage, 43% of U.S. fast food orders placed at drive-throughs, 140 billion in annual business. There's a big NIMBY effect. Nobody wants this in their backyard because of the slowdown in traffic. So what Chick-fil-A is trying to do is monitor how do you reduce the seconds per order and get more efficient pass-through of these lines. And it's an enormous, worshipful story of Chick-fil-A's internal engineering systems.
Now, I would like to add another little factoid to this discussion today.
What?
You mentioned the first drive-through. The first drive-through, we may have discussed this with you in prior years, was in California. Here's your second quiz, Corby and Marjorie. Why did the guy who founded, or at least bought, I don't know if it was the same guy, the first drive-through ever, close down the drive-through lane in his restaurant a few years ago?
Because he thought people were getting too fat.
Ding, ding, ding. That is exactly right. He thought that at least they'd get out of their car, walk into the restaurant, and use a little bit of energy. Go ahead, Marjorie.
But here's what our staff found out about Chick-fil-A this morning. They announced they would not make contributions in 2020 to the Fellowship of Christian Athletes and the Salvation Army, groups considered anti-gay. But they did not establish any criteria for corporate donations, ruling out future contributions, and the owner is still actively involved with groups such as the National Christian Foundation, an organization spearheading the derailment of the Equality Act. So I guess that's what I'm asking you. Do you know about this? Or I know people say the chicken sandwiches are really good, but they feel as though they're out to get the LGBTQ community there.
They've been feeling that for a long time. Chick-fil-A has been thought to be anti-gay for years. like Cracker Barrel and racism, they've tried to fight it. They're still closed on Sundays because of their essential evangelical bent. But Jim, I will remind you that whenever you talk about who bought McDonald's and made it efficient and a billion person and dollar business was Ray Kroc, and who funds public radio with
his wife. His wife.
His widow, $400 million.
But by the way, I don't think the first drive-through was a McDonald's. I could be wrong.
Was it Kemp's?
I don't know. How do you know that?
I don't know.
I don't know what
I'm guessing.
Why'd you say Kemp's?
Because it was one in my hometown.
By the way, before we move ahead, Marjorie's totally uninterested in this, but I am fascinated, and I think Corby is too. Our colleagues put a photograph up and said, these are starfish cheeks.
It looks like a starfish butt.
That's not true. You're mocking us or mocking me. Is that? Yeah, they're mocking me. Okay, no starfish cheeks.
So TikTok, that was supposed to be gone, but now it's back. It's under a reprieve as well.
It's not totally back. Do you know that I didn't know this weekend? If you don't already have it, you can't download it.
Well, we knew that before they get rid of it.
No, I thought when he did the pause, you could download it, but I guess I was wrong.
Okay.
Okay, fine.
Anyway, supposedly TikTok has changed the way we cook, Corby?
Supposedly, not that I'm a media critic, but the writer for the Washington Post was told to fill a lot of inches that she's
Listen to him.
A complete nothing story.
This is Corby, the editor, talking. One of the finest editors in America.
About social media. The points come down to basically a half a point, which is that TikTok, by being so widespread and so followed among young people, has helped spawn huge national crazes like melting a block of feta cheese and tomatoes in an oven, in a regular oven, and making that a pasta sauce, which was a craze during the pandemic. Its enormous popularity, the speed and shortness of the TikTok videos has been very influential in the way people use it to cook. And TikTok has been hugely influential in so many ways, the way people dance and spreading popular crazes. And so it has been for food. There's a food writer I really respect named Adam Roberts, who's saying, he was at Bon Appetit. He's been in many mainstream places. He's been on every form of social media there is, like Instagram, which is also huge, and LinkedIn and Facebook, and said TikTok and Substack. TikTok is where the most video followers are, and it's where he can have the most influence. So I think it's the idea of it's enormously popular, young people, short and lively.
Okay, I would like to comment on this too, if I may.
Certainly, Jim.
One of my finest recipes.
Oh, God.
Is a pasta cherry tomato feta dish. And actually, while Marjorie, of course, is mocking me, because that's what she is, one of her greatest skills, I actually brought it into her about a year ago, and she said it was one of the best things she ever ate.
Oh, I did?
And do you know where I got that recipe? Where?
TikTok.
Well, not really.
Oh.
I got it from the Washington Post, but where did the Washington Post writer get it from?
From TikTok?
TikTok, exactly. So once that happened, I actually have looked at a lot of recipes on TikTok. Marjorie, look at her face. And I've actually gotten a lot of fabulous recipes on TikTok that I was not aware of before.
Well,
so
there you go.
Take that, Marjorie, and do what you will with it.
We don't care about the Chinese looking at our data if Jim's getting good recipes from TikTok. Now, we have some
that's wrong. That's
fact
wrong.
check.
I don't care. That's for whoever that source is wrong.
Our staff here, that they are very fact-based, says that lovefood.com's Red's Giant Hamburger along Route 66 in Springfield, Missouri, opened in 1947 and is widely credited with being America's first drive-through restaurant. What do you think about that?
Yeah, they also said that was the cheek of a starfish, and it was his rear end. Wasn't the cheek.
Jim, I admire you. Once you latch onto a subject, you don't let it go.
Well, I figure we want to explore it as fully as we possibly can.
Next week, you can make fish butts and see how those taste.
I've actually made fish butts, Marjorie, and they're quite fine. Should try it sometime. So, Corby, before you go, there's this mournful piece somewhere. I don't know where we read it, but about do you pronounce it grape olive? How do you pronounce that word?
Oh, the olives.
Grab? How do you pronounce the olive?
Well, and if you were German, it would be Graber, but I bet they say Graber, G-R-A-B-E.
Graber, I'm sorry. I never heard of a Graber olive. The story is about how the one place that has Graber olives is about to go under for some reason, which is very sad, in California, I think, or somewhere. But what is a Graber olive? I've never even heard of it. It's supposedly one of the great olives, and I love olives.
it isn't so much the olive, which is, I think, a manzanilla, a very common California variety. It's the fact that it's allowed to ripen on the tree much longer than most olives, which are picked and immediately cured in a lye solution, which they need to be, lye and salt for months. Instead, they're left to sweeten and dry for a long time. And if you've ever had wizened, shrunken, blackened, sort of sweet olives that have been left way too long on the tree, they're really interesting and leathery. They're like fruit leather. They taste great. And in this case, they're left to sweeten and ripen longer than ordinary olives, which we think are beautiful and smooth-fleshed. If they're beautiful and smooth-fleshed and firm, they've been picked, very unripe, and they would be unimaginably bitter, horrible, if you've had unripe olives before. But these olives were left on the tree much longer than usual, then a final cure just for a bit to take them into the sweetness stage. So they still have a lot of sweet, buttery flesh, but there's also this kind of natural fruit leather, like dried apricot, sweetened texture to them. And again, this is a story mostly of climate change and labor policies. It's a family firm that started over 100 years ago in California. A couple of disastrous drought years in the very early 2020s left 1 year with no olives to harvest, and the next year with very little labor during the pandemic left for them to harvest, plus some kind of a family squabble that left them unable to have any kind of reserve budgets. They're trying to lease back land, sell the land. So it's business problems, but it's also really climate change and labor.
Okay, so here's my third and final quiz of this segment. There is a restaurant at 55 Bond Street, Marjorie and Corby, in New York City, in Manhattan. What is the name of the restaurant at 55 Bond Street? Go ahead.
I have no idea.
Odeon.
No? Ready?
The first drive-through?
No. Fish Cheeks.
Fish Cheeks.
There you
okay.
go. I mean,
all right, Jim.
How could you be any less interested in this or what?
It's hard for me to get excited about Fish Cheeks, I got to tell you.
Come to the Tufts Friedman School neighborhood. You can go down the street and have fish.
Let's do it. I'll meet you there. Corby, it's nice to see you.
Corby Kummer, thank you very much. We've been
Corby,
speaking with
bye.
Corby Kummer, Executive Director of the Food Society
He was
Policy
mocking
Program
me
at the
too.
Aspen Institute, a senior editor at The Atlantic, and a senior lecturer at the Tufts Friedman School of Nutrition Science and Policy. Thank you, Corby. After a quick break, it is time for Two More Things, where Jim and I bring you two stories that didn't fit anywhere else. So some people have previewed mine a little bit unfairly today. Anyway, you're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Gambling is everywhere.
You write those numbers, there's a feeling. Ooh, good high.
Sports betting, casinos, prediction markets, and of course, the humble scratch ticket.
You said, it's not about the money, it's about the dreams.
I'm Ian Koss, here to tell you about Scratch and Win, a new podcast about the history of the most successful, innovative state lottery in America, Massachusetts. Find Scratch and Win wherever you listen.
Support for our programs comes from you. And Johnson & Wales University. From computer science to public health, students can develop professional networks and industry experience alongside their classroom education. More at jwu.edu. And Comcast Business, committed to providing connectivity for your business with network and cybersecurity solutions. Comcast Business, powering possibilities. Restrictions apply. To learn more, you can call or visit comcastbusiness.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marjorie Egan, Jim Browdy. Friday at the library. We'll be there tomorrow, too. Friday at the library, 1 to 2, the governor joins us for Ask the Governor. Time now for Two More Things. That's the place in the show where Marjorie and I dedicate a couple of minutes to a topic that we can't stop thinking about and want to share with you, but there's no other place in the show. Take it away, Marjorie.
Well, we've talked about this a little bit with all the stuff that's going on with the executive orders and all these tariffs and all this kind of stuff. Ezra Klein is among many people. He writes a column for the New York Times. He has a great podcast, who says that we should not believe Trump is going to do any near what he says he's going to do. Steve Bannon used to be his big guy, term 2 of that term, flood the zone, flood the zone. And what that meant is that you flood the zone with everything, throw everything out. The media, because according to Bannon, we are so lazy and incompetent, will grab onto one of those things that he sends out in his flooding the zone, and then meanwhile they'll get distracted, and they'll be able to do all the real down and dirty stuff afterwards. And also that a lot of the things he's trying to do, Trump, is illegal. So the courts have stepped in. We saw that with the freezing of the aid that was already approved by Congress.
Amendment.
That's right. So a lot of the stuff he's going to do. So not to get hysterical, because he's not going to be able to do a lot of these things. And this is just a strategy. We should substitute perception for reality. He wants us to think he's achieved things when he hasn't achieved things, because of course he'll lie about them. But that's his MO.
Yeah, but as I said when Charlie Sennott was here, he said he was going to pardon the J6, as he calls them, hostages. And he did, including the ones that tried to kill cops.
That's right. He's doing a lot of things, but the question is, I mean, what is the thing that he's gotten through? He's fired a lot of people, too. But it's not clear if those will last.
Okay, did you watch the Grammys last night?
Parts of them, yes,
okay,
I did.
So Chappell Roan won for Best New Artist. In my opinion, she also should have won for Best Acceptance Speech. Here's just the first part of what she said when she won her Best New Artist award at the Grammys.
I told myself, if I ever won a Grammy and I got to stand up here in front of the most powerful people in music, I would demand that labels and the industry profiting millions of dollars off of artists would offer a livable wage and health care, especially to developing artists.
How inspirational and great when she's at this apex of her career. A lot of you are shut up and sing or shut up and pray kind of things when it comes to people like Bishop Buddy. But both of them in the last week or two used their time respectfully, brief moments, to say things that stayed with people. I think it is incredibly valuable. On the other hand, who doesn't think that Michael Jordan was the greatest basketball? Well, some think it's LeBron, but it's Michael Jordan. Remember Michael Jordan said, I don't get involved in politics. Republicans buy sneakers too. Yeah. I mean, really, you couldn't have afforded to say what you think about things that matter. So I just want to do a shout out to Chaperone. Not only is she wildly talented, but she's courageous. She did the right thing, and I think that's going to stay with people last night, because all the performers we see are zillionaires. We think are all like that. In fact, they're not. There are a lot of just starting their careers and working like dogs. And as she said, every one of them deserves a livable wage and health care. And she said it last night right on that stage. It was beautiful.
And let me repeat mine in short language.
What is it?
We should not normalize Donald Trump, but according to a lot of very smart thinkers, we shouldn't believe him either. This is all performative, and most of what he proposes has no chance of getting through.
Did you just say that a minute ago?
I'm repeating it,
So you wanted to say it for emphasis?
People are very concerned.
Well, can I say something that I repeat? Chappell Roan did a great job last night. Go ahead, your turn.
Are you going to repeat
Chappell Roan was great last night.
Fish cheeks?
No, and by the way, fish cheeks are fabulous, and I'm very upset that you and Corby ridiculed me for them.
Hope these stories...
I'm going to bring in swordfish cheeks tomorrow, by the way. I am. For you.
You know, sharks have no blood. You know that?
Well, what?
Just thought of that. I just acted them.
I'm going to bring in shark cheeks tomorrow then, too.
I don't think they have any cheeks.
Yeah, we'll find out.
Okay. They just go right down to the main part of the body.
Fine.
Anyway, after the 1 o'clock news, American Studies professor, Princeton and Harvard professor Khalil Gibran Muhammad is going to talk with us about this nationwide attack on DEI. What does he think it means? You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Do your part to support the programs you love by becoming a GBH Sustainer. Sustainers make easy monthly donations that keep the news you trust on the air, month after month, year after year. Enrolling is simple at gbh.org/sustainer.
Support for GBH comes from you. And McLean Middleton. For over 100 years, McLean Middleton has been dedicated to serving its clients and its community, offering guidance through the complexities of today's legal system, with locations in Woburn and Boston. McLean.com. And Emerson Colonial Theater, with a Broadway production of Jason Robert Brown and Alfred Urey's musical Parade, coming to Boston for 2 weeks, this March 11th through March 23rd. Tickets at emersoncolonialtheater.com.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH, HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org. GBH News, what matters to you?
I'm Jim Browdy, ahead on Hour 3 of Boston Public.
Here about anything that Puxatawny Phil has to say. Have we had enough of Puxatawny. Call or text 877-301-8970. And while we're at it, how are you making it through what Puxatawny Phil says are the next 6 weeks of cold, gray, winter weather? That's ahead. Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Amy Held. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has told reporters he is now the acting director of USAID, but that he has delegated the authority to someone. Rubio says he is troubled by reports agency officials are not cooperating with people who are asking questions about how they're spending taxpayer dollars. Rubio spoke from Latin America, where stopping illegal migration tops the agenda. The Trump administration has paused all foreign aid, but Rubio says he's giving waivers to some programs in countries he's visiting this week. NPR's Michelle Kellerman reports.
Before flying to El Salvador, Rubio visited an airbase where 43 Colombian migrants, including women and a girl, were being deported from Panama. Rubio said Panama has been working with the U.S. to stop migrants well before they can make their way to the U.S.
The only people who benefit from mass migration are traffickers. And so this is a program that shows how cooperating with our strong allies here in Panama can help to stem the flow.
The Trump administration has paused all foreign assistance, upending humanitarian and security programs across the globe. But Rubio says this flight was possible because of a waiver he issued. Michelle Kellerman, NPR News, traveling with the secretary in San Salvador.
A trade war between the U.S. and Mexico may have been averted for now. The presidents of both countries say they have reached an agreement to delay import tariffs for at least 1 month. NPR's Carrie Kahn reports.
Posting on social media, Mexico's President Claudia Sheinbaum said among the agreements reached during a phone call with Donald Trump is the deployment of 10,000 Mexican National Guard troops to its northern border. In a social media post, Trump says the U.S. will participate in high-level negotiations with Mexico over border security. Sheinbaum insists her government has seized record doses of fentanyl. One Mexican congressional leader called Trump's threats the heaviest attacks on Mexico in its independent history. Carrie Kahn, NPR News.
Lawyers are warning the Justice Department that firing career prosecutors and FBI agents without cause is not legal. NPR's Carrie Johnson reports.
Lawyers Mark Zaid, Norm Eisen, and Nancy Gertner say the civil servants at the DOJ and FBI must be afforded due process before they're terminated. Acting and interim leaders at the Justice Department have already dismissed prosecutors who investigated Donald Trump, senior FBI officials, and lawyers who worked on Capitol riot cases. The Trump administration's compiling a list of potentially thousands of FBI agents who worked on January 6 prosecutions. Lawyers warn a wholesale purge will leave the country vulnerable at a time of serious threats to national security. Making the names of FBI agents public could prompt threats from defendants, including the 1,500 people Trump recently pardoned. Carrie Johnson, NPR News, Washington.
This is NPR News.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. Officials at the MBTA have asked the Federal Railroad Administration for permission to begin the final testing stage in the South Coast Rail project. On tap is a 90-day run-through or simulated service phase that can start as soon as the agency approves the plan. If and once it is approved, and the T will be able to run trains at full speed and stop in open doors at each station. And once federal regulators are satisfied with the outcome of that, the trains would be able to begin carrying passengers. Now, when would that be? Well, the New Bedford Light says very possibly by this spring. One of the men who pleaded guilty to robbing a bank in Vineyard Haven 2022 has been sentenced to 3.5 years in prison. Tevin Porter, who's from Connecticut, has already served 2 years after pleading guilty. Porter was one of 4 men who made off with more than $39,000 after forcing bank employees to open the vault. They then tied up the employees and fled in a car they stole from one of the bank's staff members. The Vineyard Gazette reports that Porter was arrested several months later in Connecticut and came to a plea agreement with prosecutors in July of 2023. 2 others have already been sentenced for their part in the robbery. 1 more remains to be sentenced. In sports, well, it's truck day. That means that spring isn't that far off. The Red Sox equipment truck heads to Florida for Fort Myers to get ready for spring training. And all eyes on the Beanpot Hockey Tournament tonight. BU and Harvard have the early game. Northeastern BC have the late game. 40 degrees in Boston. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Indeed, designed to be an end-to-end hiring solution for businesses of all sizes to attract, interview, and hire candidates, all from one platform. Learn more at Indeed.com/NPR.
He's Jim Browdy. I'm Marjorie Egan. Welcome to hour number 3 of Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We are streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We're going to be back at the Boston Public Library tomorrow, Wednesday, and Friday. On Friday, Maura Healey, the Governor of the Commonwealth, will join us for an hour from 1 to 2 to take our questions and yours. Hello again, Jim.
Hey there, Marjorie. How are you?
Fine, thank you.
We're joined on Zoom by Khalil Gibran Muhammad. He's professor of African American Studies and Public Affairs at Princeton and a visiting professor at Harvard. Good to see you, as always.
Yes, it's great to be here. Well, sort of.
Yeah, sort of.
For us, too.
Sort of. And speaking of sort of, the president and the people who work for him have been on a 2-week crusade against everything having to do with diversity, equity, and inclusion, basically saying that if you are a person of color, if you're a woman, if you're a part of the LGBTQ community, you're basically incompetent, seems to be is what he's saying. You shouldn't have the job. So what do you make of this?
Well, that he's keeping his promise. Listen, if there was any expectation that Trump would somehow miraculously change his spots in this second time as president, he's proven anyone wrong who had that mistaken belief. I think what we're seeing in this instance is far more dangerous to this nation than what we saw before, not just in the scale, scope, and speed of his attempts to dismantle the law in so many instances, the nature of how the division and separation of government works, but also our entire federal workforce. I think it's also important, just to pick up on what you just asked about, Marjorie, to state very clearly that Trump is pursuing a line of logic and legal backlash that essentially says that everything that has happened since the passage of the Civil Rights Law in 1964 has been massive reverse discrimination.
Yeah. Which is obviously ridiculous, because we have seen, when you look at, actually, last week when he was talking about the FAA or the pilots or people that were involved in airlines, I mean, most everybody is a white male. I think it was 70% or something like that.
It was more than that. 94% of the FAA, according to data released by the FAA, are white people.
Okay.
And it is disaggregated by various positions from pilots and so on. But it just overwhelmingly, maybe that was 94% for the pilots, but either way, the lowest,
the vast majority
of whites was 75%, and then it just went up there by specialization.
You know, talking about Trump doing exactly what he said he was going to do, if I had to rate the, quote, success of what Donald Trump has done in his first 14 days, I would give this one the number one position. America's leaders are cowering in the face of his threats about DEI. We've discussed with you, and we'll discuss again today, how much of the higher ed world is either hiding out or capitulating, it seems to me, and you know much more about it than I. Private sector companies, many of which, at least appears to me, don't get any federal money. So they, too, are changing nomenclature. But let's start with higher ed, since we talked to you about it so much. We talked the other day about a piece in the Globe about Northeastern, where they changed the name. It used to be called Office of DEI. Northeastern believes in a welcoming and inclusive environment for all. That's all replaced by belonging at Northeastern, whatever that means. I'm assuming, we haven't spoken to you since this happened, I'm assuming that the decision by Harvard, after all the great fanfare about this $100 million commitment to their slavery project, outsourcing the whole damn thing and getting rid of all the internal staff, is another way to sort of just placate the Trumpites in the face of their assault here. Is that being unfair to them or any of the other higher education institutions?
No, I mean, I don't think it's unfair, but it does require a little bit of nuance. So the larger pushback against the slavery and remembrance work coming out of Larry Bacow, the former president's commitment to reckoning with Harvard's own history definitely has shown a spirit of retreat in the wake of the pro-Palestinian demonstrations of a year ago. Because as your listeners will recall, so much of that energy in criticizing Israel's bombing of Gaza was then attacked for being part of a woke mentality on campus that was by definition, according to Bill Ackman and others, as anti-Semitic. And so there's not a far leap here from the broader climate of backlash, particularly from high-profile billionaire donors and others, to saying anything having to do with race and racism or anti-racism on Harvard's campus is by definition suspect. And so we started to see pushback internally from various staff faculty who were leading some of the initiatives. Several resigned. And so this is the latest resignation, or in this case, termination, to be seen in that light. But I do think that it is a form of capitulation to that broader political climate, and it's deeply disturbing.
Are there any, one of the things Marjorie and I were talking about, and so I did about 3 seconds worth of research. We've talked to you about the very few high-profile exceptions to this capitulation rule. The head of Mount Holyoke, the head of Wesleyan, and in light of the fact that your primary employment is now at Princeton, we read a story in the Daily Princetonian, if that's how you pronounce it, in which it appears at least your president there with a report that came out of this DEI report, I think in the last couple of days, which reads the inclusion and affirmed that Princetonians, I almost can't even say the word, Princetonians have supported inclusion and excellence, equality and free speech, even amid a national movement to drive a wedge between these ideals. The excellence of America's leading research in universities, including Princeton, depends not only on attracting talented people from all backgrounds, but also on ensuring they can thrive on our campuses. That sounds to me like somebody else who's at least attempting to stand up against this tsunami. Is that fair?
I think it is fair. I was not going to bring up Princeton in this conversation, but to your point, the president did make a public defense of their existing DEI infrastructure and a ongoing commitment to publicly share their diversity, equity, and inclusion numbers, meaning that who's on campus across various categories, and to continue to use that evidence along with what we call in the field a climate survey as a way of holding the university accountable to make sure that people continue to feel like they have a place on campus. What is most notable in this instance is not that Harvard has dismantled its DEI office at the highest level, led by Sherry Charleston, a Black woman who was accused of plagiarism about a year ago by the Chris Rufo and Washington Free Beacon team. It's not that work has been dismantled, but there's been no public defense of that work from Alan Garber. And so it creates a situation on campus where people are rightly concerned about whether or not they will be vulnerable if another Virginia Fox comes along and starts picking off people or saying that these people are engaging in reverse racism, et cetera.
By the way, we should mention Virginia Fox, who's the Republican chair of that committee, targeted your course in particular called Race and Racism in the Making of the U.S. as the Global Power. And if I remember correctly, other than what I think you described, a private email, you got no support from the administration, and that was during Biden, not during Donald Trump. Well, we're talking to Khalil Gibran Muhammad.
Before this all happened, and after people were trying to make up for our ignorance after the Floyd killing, we were constantly talked, and I was an American Studies major at Stanford, which isn't a bad college, knew nothing about Tulsa, what happened with burning down the so-called Black Wall. I didn't know. It was humiliating how much I didn't know. So we have all these majors now in African American studies or gender issues or women's issues. It's not, to me, a far reach that they're going to come after programs like yours or teaching those subjects.
Oh, well, listen, Marjorie, they already have. I mean, so first of all, we have to clarify who the they is. So in this instance, the federal government is putting increasing pressure on every aspect of higher education, including recent executive orders targeting K through 12. But let's stick with higher education for a moment. What Harvard is facing, and presumably all private universities, is increasing scrutiny by the federal government to essentially threaten them with removing federal funds for research. In Harvard's case, about $700 million, it is estimated, would fall under the purview of federally sponsored research. Some of that is already in jeopardy because of the executive orders that have shut down funding streams all over the place. So that's one aspect of it. But at the state level and in public colleges and universities, we have seen the dismantling of women's centers, literally places on campus that are open to support women through various culturally and gender-specific programming. They don't turn away men or non-gender conforming people, but they're there to ensure that women have access to information and to a community that would help them feel comfortable on a campus, often campuses around this country that for hundreds of years excluded women altogether. So it's not an abstraction and it's not a thing to come. It is a thing that is happening right now.
How do you, I hope the answer is not just the difference in individuals. What is it in those three presidents we described, Princeton, Mount Holyoke, and Wesleyan, that causes them, and I assume with an approval of their boards, to say, I can speak out, I can likely put our federal funding at risk, with the vast majority of university presidents who are either hiding or actively capitulating? What separates them?
Jim, I think when this whole season is over, you're gonna write an investigative report. You're gonna go back to print journalism for a moment and try to figure this out.
I'm gonna run it by you before I publish it, though, so don't worry.
Hell knows. I mean, really, let's be honest here. I mean, in two of those instances, the presidents are white guys. At least one of them is Jewish. And to some degree, that may matter to both the scrutiny that they are experiencing, as well as their own sense that this is a historic moment and they don't want to be on the wrong side of history. So I cannot say with any certainty, but that's one way that I might consider it. I think the other is that it's a big country, and a lot of people in these leadership roles are looking in the mirror. They are looking at the White House. They are looking at the bad faith arguments and the fascist lies, and they're saying, I don't want to have to go home and explain to the people who I live with, my children, my partner in life, my parents, that somehow I'm going along with this. It's surprising that there aren't more who are rejecting all of this, but some people are stepping up. We could look at Costco. I don't know if you heard the news that Costco recently had a proposal by a shareholder to essentially get rid of DEI. Now, the actual proposal basically asks Costco to do a risk assessment of its DEI policies. Costco forcefully pushed back and essentially said that not only is this good for the people who shop here to see people who work here that look like them, this is good for our business, and we are sticking to what they said are their code of ethics. We are committed to this work. Costco right now is an outlier because so many others have folded. So this is a leadership moment, and when the dust settles, we'll be able to look back and see where people fell on either side of the line.
By the way, 19 Republican attorneys general have, I believe, sent a warning letter to Costco saying, get in line or else, whatever or else means. We're talking to Khalil Gibran Muhammad.
So much for libertarianism, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
The government getting out of our lives, just like it's in our bedroom.
In the bedroom, that's absolutely where it is.
You go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, if this isn't premature, I mean, so how do people resist this? Is there a plan? I mean, do academics get together, or do college presidents try to get together, or what?
Well, yes. And I mean, in all instances, the more that people work collectively against these attacks, the more likelihood they will have success. and the less likely that any individual will experience the full weight of sanctions. We already know that within the federal government, there's reporting just this morning by NPR that some federal employees who were interested in taking what is likely an illegal buyout inspired by the tech bros and their vision of how you get rid of at-will employees with an 8-month severance package. Some have said now in what has become a viral Reddit post that they were thinking about doing it, but now they're not. And other people are like, I'm going to stick around too. So to answer your question, Marjorie, it is surprising that we've not seen a task force of university and college presidents coming together to actively strategize in defense of their industry. And I know these people are smart enough to recognize that what is happening at the federal level is not a good faith effort, that it is not about better efficiency. They are serially lying about what is happening on college campuses, and they are an existential threat to the very nature of academic freedom. So yes, they should get together and figure out how in numbers they can have strength to resist this.
What are the names what are you teaching at Princeton?
Surprise, surprise. Race, Inequality, and American Democracy will be my next class. I'm not teaching until the fall, but it's a version of the class that the Republicans don't like.
So is there a piece of you that worries about not only the Virginia Foxes of the world, but despite what you said about the president of Princeton, that ultimately there will be a request that you, I don't know what expression I use, tone it down or whatever it is, for fear that you might jeopardize, your work might jeopardize federal funding for Princeton? Does that worry you at all?
I hadn't thought about the direct link between a class like mine and the threat of federal funding. I mean, so the short answer is no, because they would have to change the very nature of academic freedom in their actual governing bylaws. And the same would be true at Harvard, meaning that tenure protects precisely this sort of thing, the intrusion of politics on the very pursuit and nature of academic production, in which case would be a change of contract and would be, an end essentially of how we understand the very nature of higher education. So I don't anticipate that, but I do want to make a point. The conservative movement to destroy these fields, African American studies, women's studies, ethnic studies, indigenous studies, you name it, disability studies, it has now moved into a new a level of attack. They are starting to not just link exposure of the funding that goes to so-called DEI, but they are linking it now to actual faculty salaries. So when you hear these big numbers, millions of dollars spent on DEI bureaucracy, those numbers are now including the salaries of people who work in departments like I do. And that is very dangerous because, of course, a skeptical public who believes that universities are already bloated and charge too much for tuition will now say, well, yeah, as a matter of efficiency, we should get rid of all these fields. One more point on this. The entire modern university structure, particularly in the humanities, is essentially set up to promote Eurocentrism and white identity. I'm not trying to be controversial here, but a standard English curriculum in a university or a college is paying homage and canonizing the ideas of English writers, the Enlightenment, you name it. So this idea that only race and racial identity operate in contexts of non-Europeans is absurd, and everybody in higher education mostly knows this, but of course the public and the politicians are operating on a different register.
Well, speaking of operating on a different register, or maybe not, one of the big criticisms of academia in the United States is, the whole idea that the real diversity problem is about political viewpoints. Everybody's a big lefty and there aren't enough conservatives. What do you say to that?
Well, it's a marketplace of ideas, right? So if climate change is science-driven based on carbon emissions, does a university have an obligation to then say, well, we got to make sure in order to teach our students well that we have climate change deniers who believe that it is the hand of God who is determining the end times that we are all experiencing. It's absurd. So yes, there are conservative ideas on campus. Yes, there are conservative faculty. Are they the majority? No. And part of that is that some of those ideas don't hold up to peer-reviewed scrutiny. And so here we are. I don't have a solution for that problem, but partisanship has never been the litmus test for whether one should have a place on any college or university. This is, again, part of a shell game played by conservative activists to essentially define the university as, quote unquote, big D Democrat and liberal and Marxist.
So let's do Nostradamus for the last couple of minutes here. It's 4 years from now. Set aside potential litigation challenging some of the things that Trump is doing in the area we've been talking to you about for the last 20 minutes. What does higher education look like in 4 years after Trump's jihad against diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Well, I think that we have far more segregation in higher education. We'll see a greater movement of black and brown students to what have been traditionally called either HBCUs or Hispanic serving institutions or minority serving institutions. We'll see a greater uptick in admissions at community colleges, where by dint of low income status and proximity, a lot of students make their way to those schools. Oftentimes those students move on to four-year schools, which may or may not happen now because of the pressure. The sheer fact of the presence of black or brown people has now been identified as prima facie anti-white and reverse discrimination. That is the only way to describe this insane argument, as Donald Trump said at his press conference last week, that because of common sense, he knows that DEI caused that plane crash, or the crash between the helicopter and the plane. So we will see universities become more hostile to the presence of black and brown students. We will see fewer of them on campus, and we will see a diminishment in academic programming that represents a better understanding of the entire world, which, headline, is not majority white.
On that upbeat note, it's good to see you. As always, we really appreciate your thoughts, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks for having me.
For joining us.
Thank you, Marjorie.
Yeah, thank you. We've been speaking with Khalil Gibran Muhammad, professor of African American Studies and Public Affairs at Princeton and a visiting professor at Harvard. Thanks again for joining us. Okay, up next, it's Groundhog Day all over again. Why do we keep doing this? Do we really need to put on our best three-piece suits and top hats to celebrate a stinky, underdwelling beast who can't even forecast the weather accurately every year? That, of course, would be Punxsutawney Phil. We're opening the lines and asking you, are you tired of Punxsutawney Phil? Do you pay any attention to what Punxsutawney Phil thinks? Do you think he should be dragged out of his cozy little burrow and held up in the air? What would Cy Montgomery think about this, Jim? These poor little, what are they, groundhogs? Poor little groundhogs,
yes,
abused.
Yes,
and they can't even tell us about the weather. What do you think about 6 more weeks of winter? Time to get rid of Punxsutawney Phil. In a nice way, of course, leaving him alone. Listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Be welcome to one of the wonders of the world. Be welcome to the Panama Canal.
The Panama Canal. President Trump says we're taking it back, and his new Secretary of State is in Panama to push the case. Many locals are shocked.
That was something that we weren't expecting, in our 2025 bingo card.
I'm Ari Shapiro, hosting All Things Considered from the Panama Canal on NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And Supermicro and NVIDIA, accelerating AI with a wide range of AI servers and the NVIDIA AI Enterprise software platform. Supermicro is committed to driving AI infrastructure breakthroughs with rack-scale innovations. And Mass General Brigham Health Plan, ranked number 1 in member satisfaction among commercial health plans in Massachusetts by J.D. Power for the 2nd consecutive year. Details at mgbhp.org/.
People remember what that is? That's Bill Murray smashing his alarm clock in the great film Groundhog Day. Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marjorie Egan, Jim Browdy, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Governor joins us on Friday in person from 1 to 2. And on Thursday, in the week that some of the most controversial votes, confirmation votes, are going to happen in the United States Senate, Senator Ed Markey will join us on Thursday of this week. So the rest of the show is dedicated to Marjorie researching whether groundhogs are beavers. She thinks they're the same thing.
Well, they're close cousins. People mix them up,
fine.
Jim.
She asked on our morning editorial meeting, and we thought we'd open it up to all of you to help us get some answers. In reality, Punxsutawney Phil, it's a groundhog, which is a rodent, also known as a woodchuck, Marjorie, saw his shadow yesterday, which allegedly means we get 6 more weeks of winter. If he hadn't seen his shadow, spring would come sooner. The problem is, Phil not only isn't the most reliable groundhog, he's one of the least reliable groundhogs. That title actually goes to Staten Island Chuck. This is all true, by the way. We know this because the National Centers for Environmental Information tracks the annual event and grades the groundhogs and also a tortoise for some reason. We're going to give you the whole list in a minute. Anyway, this year, Phil and Chuck have differing forecasts. Phil says we're going to get more winter, as I told you. Chuck says spring is coming early. So why do we put so much pomp and circumstance into these creatures and their predictions? And why have we never even seen our own, do you know what her name is? Ms. G.
Ms. G, that's
from
Massachusetts
on live
groundhog.
TV.
That's
our number
right.
is 877-301-8970. We have a couple things. One is, how do you feel about this groundhog issue? And do you put any stock in it? And secondly, what do you want the groundhog to tell you? Would you prefer 6 more weeks of winter?
No.
Or would you prefer, a lot of people would. They like skiing and other stupid stuff, skating and sledding and whatever. Or would you prefer an earlier spring? The number is 877-301-8970. And I'd like to share some of the results with you.
Yep.
Number 1, as I said, is Staten Island Chuck. I assume that is a groundhog.
That's right.
85% accurate. Okay?
Yes.
Now, 17th out of 19 is Punxsutawney Phil, which is only 35% accurate. Here's the most incredible statistic. Ahead of the number 17th ranked Punxsutawney Phil, which is a live, not beaver, what's the other thing? Groundhog.
Yep.
14 to 16, meaning higher accuracy, are stuffed groundhogs.
That's
These
right.
are not even
Taxidermed.
live. Taxidermed groundhogs, which means stuffed. I think it's called Uni, Poor Richard, and something else. The worst of them all, since you're interested in that, 19th out of 19, only 25% correct, is Mojave Max. What is Mojave Max, Marjorie?
A tortoise?
A tortoise, exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
So I did not know that the poor Punxsutawney Phil and all these other groundhogs.
Punxsutawney, not
Punxsutawney, however you say it.
There's an N in there.
Phil.
Punxsutawney Phil.
Punxsutawney Phil gets dragged out of his little burrow to make this performance, and the lights flash, and everybody's screaming and yelling.
It's horrible.
And this weird guy in a top hat holds him up in the air. This is torture for the groundhogs. That's one thing. I don't think Sam Montgomery would like this one bit.
Okay.
What do? Do they stuff the thing back in the burrow
Yes, they
after
do.
this whole
Stuff it right back
thing
in
is
there.
over? It's
Yep.
it's traumatized. I mean, this poor little thing probably has
You think it's a
PTSD.
beaver, so you don't even know.
Well, I learned today that the big difference between beavers and groundhogs is size. Beavers are a lot bigger than
How much
groundhogs.
bigger are they?
Well, they can be up to 60 pounds.
They can?
Little groundhogs
A beaver?
are like about 30 pounds.
Oh, that's
yeah,
incredible.
woodchucks, the other name for it, groundhogs, and beavers are confusable cousins, Jim. So when you made fun of me for confusing them.
I did make fun of you.
Yeah, that wasn't that big of a deal. The groundhogs, like I said, stocky build, slightly flattened,
No one
bushy
cares about
tails. And they have these big, long burrows, 2 to 6 feet deep, up to 20 feet long under the ground to keep warm in the wintertime. And like I said, the beavers are much bigger. They can weigh between 30 and 65 pounds, and they have a long tail.
Well, continuing that theme for a second about the beaver versus the groundhog, here's some sound from Naked Gun, or Leslie Nielsen, if he were running the Punxsutawney proceedings. Here he is.
Nice beaver.
Thank you. I just had it stuffed.
Let me help you with that.
Okay, that was one of the funniest movies of all
That was
time.
Priscilla
Figure that out
Presley.
yourself.
In
Okay,
that movie,
301-8970. There were actually three
why
questions.
do we do this every year? Why do we do this every year? This has been going on like more than 100 years.
Yeah.
And they try to pretend that poor Punxsutawney Phil has been around since 1887 because
1886.
they feed him some special groundhog nog.
Same one.
Fed to him each year.
Okay, fine.
And people get all excited about this.
I'm excited about
Why
it.
do we have 19 Punxsutawney Phil? We have 19 different Phils.
I'm with Staten
different
Island
places.
Chuck myself.
Okay.
Now, let me just say this to you. We have three questions on the table.
Yeah.
The first question, of course, is it a beaver or a groundhog?
It's a groundhog.
Okay, and that's the first question.
Yep.
The second
Or a woodchuck.
The second question is, a lot of you do pay attention to what Punxsutawney Phil has to say. Why? And number three, or a tortoise or something. And number three, if you had the choice, if you were the decision maker, 6 more weeks of winter or an early spring, which would you choose and why? And by the way, if you're concerned about the pronunciation of Punxsutawney, which a lot of people are, here's, how do you say this guy's name? Julian Miguel, is that how you say it?
Julian.
Okay, well, whoever he is. Can he please say Punxsutawney? Go ahead.
Fish cheek.
Fresh. Okay.
Fish cheeks.
Okay, fine. Enough of him. 877-301-8970.
Listen to this.
Did you like the movie Groundhog Day?
It was a riot.
Loved
I
the
loved
movie.
it. Yeah,
Loved it.
it was Bill Murray and I think Andy McDowell. She was
Not
great.
sure.
Okay. George.
Thank you, John.
Who was
her. John said it was
thank
Andy
you, John.
McDowell. Thanks.
George from New Hampshire says he spent much of his life in western Pennsylvania where Punxsutawney hangs out.
Punxsutawney.
Yeah. He says, I don't know how to tell you this, but lore has it they used to eat the groundhog after they pulled him out of his burrow.
Do you know why they ate it? They thought it was a beaver. That was why they ate it.
Okay.
You were still
and then
reading
this
that?
other person says she loves groundhogs. Leave the poor little fellow alone. They had one in their yard this summer, this texter says, and they either had rabies or distemper, and it was very
Okay, no one cares
sad.
about that. Let me just say this. I ridicule those who believe in Punxsutawney Phil until Punxsutawney Phil gives me the answer I want. I mean this sincerely. When Punxsutawney Phil does not see its shadow, and as a result, spring is coming, don't you feel that's great?
That's right.
It's
You
probably
do
going to
feel,
happen.
even though it's climate
Even
change,
though he's only
making
right
it
35%
come
of the
soon.
time.
Lance and Lynn says he doesn't want these current weather prophets. He wants someone he knows more personally, like Alvin the Chipmunk.
Okay, fine. 877-301-8970. There are a million questions around Punxsutawney Phil, and if you want us to tell you what some of the other 19 woodchucks or tortoises predicted yesterday, that is, we're happy to do that.
Okay.
By the way, PETA, do you know what PETA wants to do?
Yeah, they want to do a vegan sandwich.
Instead of having a groundhog,
That's
which
right.
they think is cruel, as Marjorie
cruel.
does, they want a vegan sandwich predicting.
I
How
don't
would a
know.
vegan sandwich predict
I
that?
don't, that's going to get far. I don't know if
But how
PETA's-
would it do it, even if you supported that idea?
Because there
How
would be
the
no animal involved.
No, but how would the vegan sandwich predict? How does a vegan sandwich communicate with humans?
I don't know.
About what their position is.
They called it a weather reveal cake, in which pink would mean one thing and blue would mean another
Okay,
thing.
fine. Let's take some calls. Douglas and Newton, we're talking about Groundhog Day and whether you believe in it and winter and whatever else. Hello there. Hi.
Hi, how are you?
We're
Hi,
excellent.
Jim.
Thank
Hi,
you.
Marjorie.
Hi.
I'd like, first of all, I do see it as animal cruelty.
Yes.
And I really don't endorse it, but apparently a lot of people do.
They do.
I'd like to suggest the event that would put an end to this tradition.
What is that?
And that is that next year, somebody secretly replace Punxsutawney Phil with a badger. So that when the guy in the top hat puts his hand in there, he's going to come up. It's not going to be 6 weeks more or less of winter. It's going to be 5 fewer fingers. And that will be the end of the cruelty.
You're a genius, actually. That is a brilliant idea.
you.
Douglas, thank you very
you
much.
for that.
So Douglas would obviously prefer the vegan sandwich. And one of our colleagues, I think it might have been Jamie, said the vegan sandwiches,
Right.
if you hold it up to the sun and there's a shadow of the sandwich, that means winter will be 6 weeks longer.
Did you read this text from Charlotte?
No.
Who says, remember when the former mayor of New York City, Bill de Blasio, dropped the groundhog and it died?
No.
His quote, I don't know if they're kidding me or not.
Where is it?
Asked if he had any regrets. De Blasio said, yeah, 100%. I'm like, don't make me hold a blankety blank groundhog. I mean, what the hell? Let me tell you exactly what happened.
Wow.
So there you go.
We lost this race for Congress, I assume, because of that.
He dropped the groundhog and it died. Let's go to David from Andover. Should we get rid of this ridiculous tradition of Punxsutawney Phil?
Why? Excuse me, before you answer, Dave, what do you care if you don't have to pay attention to it? That's not an appropriate question.
Because
who cares if they have fun doing it?
They have groundhogs all over the country.
The cruelty thing.
They're in their burrows,
the cruelty.
right?
You're right
They're
about
pulling
the
burrow.
cruelty.
They're pulling the thing out of there. They're subjecting it to all these flashing lights and screaming crowds. I mean, imagine if you'd been underground for like 6 months
that's a
in your
very
little
good point.
burrow and they dragged you out. That's right.
Can you imagine if they dragged a vegan sandwich out of the ground? David, I'm sorry to hold you up. Welcome to the show. Thanks for calling. Hi.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
First time, long time.
Wow.
First time.
Thank you.
Yeah, my feeling is to explain the variability and accuracy of these various rodents.
Mm-hmm.
It depends where they are. It's a geographic thing.
That's a good point.
How much cloud cover occurs in different geographic areas in the middle of winter.
Mm.
And that's it. That's the explanation for why they're variable. But I agree, you could hold up a sandwich instead of a live rodent.
Well, wait a second. It's not just geography, David. It's also, even if you account for the geographical differences, I think most of us, I'm not science focused, but the issue of whether a groundhog sees its shadow should not be determinative on the issue of how long winter should be, right?
Well,
you disagree?
I'm sure there's something to it.
You do?
Why are there some reliable rodents?
Oh, like Staten Island Chuck, for example.
That's right.
That's a very
Apparently,
good point.
Staten Island Chuck also bit Mayor Bloomberg when he was the mayor. Yeah,
David, that was an excellent first call. Thank you very much.
Crime up there in Staten Island. It's outrageous.
Yeah.
Now,
He's from
Mayor
I
do know that.
Okay.
Massachusetts State Groundhog, apparently, it's up. Do we mention it's up in Drumlin?
No, Drumlin
Farm Wildlife Sanctuary in Lincoln.
No.
And of course, Miss G, that's our Punxsutawney Phil version, also predicted a month of snow. But what they also said in this story from Mass Live is that Miss G trained hard for her return to public life. Yes, because she was running around her outdoor enclosure. So maybe they didn't have to pull her out of the burrow.
No.
And no one appeared more excited about all this than Massachusetts Governor Maura Healey, who posted an Instagram reel hyping up the groundhog's reappearance.
Well, can I tell you something? I will be very disappointed when Governor Healey's here at 1 o'clock on Friday. If you do not rake her over the coals for her treatment of the groundhog, Miss G, I'll be very disappointed.
Did you mention that Miss G is more accurate?
No. Is she, what number is she?
Yes, 64%. She's been predicting since 2008. Her accuracy rate is 64% compared to Punxsutawney Phil's, who's at a pathetic 30%.
By the way, this last caller thinks that there's something to the science of the groundhog shadow thing. What do you think of that?
I don't know, Jim. I was never very good in science. Colby from Somerville. What do you think, Colby?
Hey, everyone. Long-time caller, first-time listener.
Thank you.
Look, I just wanted to say, I think Punxsutawney Phil is a punk. He should give us more winter every year. This is ridiculous. We're in a climate crisis. I can't believe he's colluding with big oil to take away winter.
Yeah, let's hope he can remain pure in that regard, Colby. I'm with you 100%. You like the wintertime then, huh?
I do. Well, except for the seasonal depression, but what can you do about that?
But what was nice? You could get some of these ponds and lakes to freeze, so people could actually go ice skating, which used to be.
I saw someone ice fishing next to 93 in Malden the other week. Can you believe that?
Well, let me just tell you something. Since you brought that up, Colby, don't go away. Marjorie ridicules virtually everything I do. And it is true that when she and I went ice fishing a bunch of years ago, I had to be pulled out on a toboggan by the fish nerds.
Oh,
but Colby,
so humiliating.
Okay, let's move on from that. Colby, one of us caught a fish and then grilled it in the Bob house. One of us did not.
That's right.
Who would you guess caught the fish, Colby? Go ahead.
I'm going to say Marjorie.
That would be wrong.
Jim caught the fish.
Really?
Not only I catch the fish,
impressed.
I used what's that thing called where you cut the hole in the ice thing? What's that thing called?
I don't know.
Whatever it is.
Auger?
Auger.
Thank
Colby
you.
knows what he's talking about. I not only augered the damn thing, Colby, but I caught the only fish. It was a tiny little fish.
Yeah.
But it was the only fish. Colby, thank you very much for the call.
Jim back
loaded me back on the
toboggan
toboggan and dragged me to shore. Sadly, that part is totally true. And I did catch a fish.
You did catch a fish.
By the way, how did I catch a fish?
You
don't spear it, do you?
No, you put the line down.
It's like a regular fishing thing?
Unroll it. It's not.
How come you didn't catch a fish?
I don't know why I didn't catch a fish, but I'm glad I didn't.
And then we were in the Bob House out there with we're drinking beer and the guys, the fish nerds.
The fish nerds.
Do they still have podcasts?
I don't know. They had a great podcast about ice fishing.
You know who I think they are now? The Froze Bros. I think they gave up the whatever.
Those are the guys we talked to the other day. We didn't talk to them, actually. Did we talk to them? I don't think we did.
Froze Bros.
We talked about them.
Yes, we did. One of them called.
That's
the
right.
only
He
reason we
called
knew
up
about
and told us he was a Froze Bro. Everything you ever want to know about things frozen. And happily, the frozen foods from Canada are still in jeopardy, Jim. We'll have to wait and see what happens.
He's talking to Trudeau this afternoon.
He's meeting with
Trump
Justin Trudeau. He doesn't like Justin Trudeau because he thinks he's better looking than he is.
Wait till you hear why Mark from Melrose is calling. Mark from Melrose, welcome to the show. Hi.
Oh, hi. Thank you very much for taking my call.
Sure.
Yes, I have a very dear I can't speak for Pennsylvania, but I have a very dear friend who actually is one of the handlers of Miss G out at
Drumlin
Farm in Mass Audubon. So, yes, these are not wild animals that they're pulling out from the underground. These are rescue animals that are part of their wildlife program. These are animals that they do lots of educational programs with school kids and stuff throughout the year. So these are, animals that are being handled by humans every day and are, part of these educational programs. So don't know about what's going on in Pennsylvania, but I would suspect similar down there.
Well,
by the way,
in fairness, they did make that clear in the Mass Live
I'm
story.
really glad you called, Mark. Thank you.
Miss G had been running around her outdoor enclosure. But when you read these stories about poor Puxatawny Phil down there
he doesn't know about Pennsylvania.
I know, but I'm just saying they pulled him out of the borough. But apparently Miss G is not in her borough. Correct, Mark? No borough for her.
Definitely not in the borough. And it's actually, like Puxatawny Phil, they're actually stage names, for groundhogs, because groundhogs only live about 6 years, evidently. So, it's constantly replaced with another groundhog.
So they're lying about Puxatawny Phil
Well, I don't
being
think you have to say lying. They may be misrepresenting.
You want to have a 150-year-old, groundhog, however long that's been going on down there. So,
that's a very good point. I'm really glad Mark called. When my kids were little, we used to go to Drumlin Farm all the time.
Great place.
And it was fabulous. Yep. Now, here is probably the smartest text of the day. It's from Maurice in Northborough. Did you know that groundhog cheeks taste like pork chops and beaver cheeks taste like cod cheeks? Now, if you weren't listening to the show, thank you.
No.
If you weren't listening to the show earlier, I'm not going to explain it to you. Just listen to the show on the podcast and we'll figure it out.
Did you see what Stephen in Yarmouth said?
No, I didn't read it.
He wants to know why
South
nobody
Yarmouth
mentioned that Puxatawny Phil's theme song, Have You Seen Your Mother, Baby, Standing in the Shadow, by the Rolling Stones, used to be Me and My Shadow until 1966.
Really? It's incredible.
Yeah, Me and My
No,
Shadow.
I know the song. Thank
Walking
you.
down the avenue.
I know the song. Let's go to Jerry on Cape Cod. You are next on the show here. Hi.
Hey, how you doing?
We're really good. Thank you.
First time caller. Marjorie, my wife's from Fall River. I'm originally from Brighton.
Oh.
So clearly I'm married up.
Absolutely. I like that you say that, Jerry. Thank you.
I'd just like to see 12 weeks of winter. This is nonsense. We haven't had winter since 2015, so I don't care what Punxsutawney Phil sees or what we do with the groundhog. I would just like some more winter.
It's so interesting you mentioned, first of all, I hate winter, and I know I'm in the minority, and Jerry, you're in the majority. Do you remember we were in this studio, Jerry, with Charlie Baker, who had just been elected?
Just been elected.
It was February of 2015. Yep. He was looking at the roof of the New Balance.
Right across from us.
And talking about in the air.
20 guys on the roof shoveling the snow because the snow is so heavy. And then there was that great picture, Jerry, of the people getting off the red line in
Quincy.
The long
march.
Like Dr. Zhivago walking through snow up to their waist.
Jerry, what do you like most about winter? Because, again, I'm an outlier here. I don't like it at all. What do you like?
I love hiking in the winter. I like being out cross-country skiing. I just like being out in nature. There's no bugs. It's clear. There's less people. It's beautiful.
Wish I was like you. I mean, Jerry, that was great. Thank you for your first call. They were appreciated. Did you see the story in the Globe?
Winter. I would much rather have a lot more snow. Imagine if it snowed on Friday instead of rained on Saturday. We would have had a beautiful, beautiful weekend for the kids to go sledding.
Was there a story in the Boston Globe somewhere this morning about the joys of night hiking in winter? I should have asked Jerry if he was into that. I mean, I'm not doing that.
No, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to do it either. No. But one of our texters has a theory about why there's so much hoopla surrounding Punxsutawney Phil.
Punxsutawney Phil.
Carrie in Shrewsbury says the answer is children. She says 50% of kindergarten and pre-K curriculum for January is all about Groundhog Day. Yeah. And where's the other one that with the... Oh, we left out the most important question of the day, Jim. How much wood would a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck
Where's that come
wood?
from? That's Shakespeare, right? Now, let me just say...
Merchant of Venice.
And an anonymous texter says, don't forget, this is true, the octopus that predicts World Cup winners. Remember that? That's true.
No.
There was, some such thing. Let's go to Matt and Lester. Hi, Matt.
Hi,
What's
Matt.
up?
How we doing today, guys?
We're good,
well,
thank you.
An animal can't predict the weather, basically.
Yeah, we're suspicious, too.
Wait, why do you say that?
Well, it's not explainable.
Well, maybe they have a feel. Maybe they have a feel.
They might have one of those Doppler radars in the burrow. What do you think, Matt?
I doubt that, but my point is, I don't know where it started, when it started, or why it started, but as it's gone on over the years, you got to think about the economic impact that this community is getting. I don't know what it's like with all these other things, but down what's it called? Gobbler's Knob?
Gobbler's Knob. Yeah,
wow,
wouldn't you like to come from Gobbler's Knob? Where did you grow up? Gobbler's Knob. Wow. But that's right. They do make a lot of money.
I'm guessing the rest of the year there's not a whole lot going on down there until this comes around, and then you get the media circus down there, and all the they have carnivals and functions and so on and so forth, and parties and everything. So I think it's good for the economies. And Phil doesn't look like he's hurting for any child.
No, that is so.
Really healthy.
By the way, that is the smartest thing that's been said. He looks like he's really well taken care of in that regard. Matt, thank you for your call. So we just got a text from a relatively high-profile person in town. She used to be a meteorologist before she was a news person. J.C. Monahan texted in. Here's what J.C. said.
What'd she say?
All meteorologists know our first textbook is, in fact, written by Phil. He's very important in our community. So there you go. And if J.C. Monahan says it, I assume it must be true.
Listen to this. Thank you, J.C. Monahan, for
Good to hear
texting
from you, JC,
in. The population of Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania, which includes Gobbler's Knob, 5,769 people in 2020.
And how many people go for the pulling out of the thing?
Well, Tammy in Bradford says she wants to drag Jim and Marjorie out
look for a
shadow instead. Yeah. Okay.
Did you watch the thing? Did you see the thing yesterday with the guy?
No, but I was overwhelmed with these stories about Punxsutawney Phil.
Now, we want to repeat, if you just tuned in, this is actually the educational part of our program. Punxsutawney, they rated some environmental thing, rated the 19 predictors of how long Christmas is.
Yeah, they were terrible.
There are 3 stuffed groundhogs.
Right.
Meaning dead, taxidermed. There is 1 tortoise. And all told, 19 entities doing this. 17th worst, meaning the third from the absolute worst, is Punxsutawney Phil.
You forgot to mention number 3.
Who was number 3?
Lander Lil.
What is Lander Lil?
A prairie dog statue, Jim.
No, I didn't know.
Has predicted
is that really true?
75% accuracy. That's right. A prairie dog statue. That's right. Okay.
Let's go.
And Miss G is pretty good. Our local here. Where's Miss G? I think she's right up there.
You said
top,
she was. Yeah. No. You said she was ahead of whatever.
Yeah. There's Gertie the groundhog.
Yeah.
She comes in 5th. Jimmy the groundhog. They give them all these names: Woodstock Willie, Buckeye Chuck.
Okay, fine.
French Creek Freddie.
Can I take a call?
Go ahead.
Thank you, Elizabeth in Gloucester. Welcome to the show. How are you?
Hi. Good. How are you?
We're good. Thank you. Very well. Thank you. What's up?
Yeah, to put the record straight, there actually was a Punxsutawney Phil dropped a couple of years ago, and it did in fact die. Yes,
no,
true. Yes,
the guy in the top hat dropped the beaver and killed it.
I thought it was Bill de Blasio, the mayor.
Yeah, I think that's who it was.
Yeah, because he's very tall. Very tall. It's like 6'6" or something.
Yeah, it's a different groundhog, but it's still dead. Whoever it is,
yes, it died.
Dead,
and it was Punxsutawney Phil, and it was, the animal right activists really wanted it to stop.
Well, they should. So. I mean, how would you like to get dropped and blown your head by Bill de Blasio?
It's not fun.
No, I've had it happen, and believe me,
they should only have short people haul Punxsutawney Phil out, so if they drop them, they don't have that far to go.
Listen, is this? Thank you, Elizabeth. I'm glad Elizabeth's enjoying this as much as we are. Is this a real quote from De Blasio?
I read it already.
Oh, you read it already?
Yes, I read it already.
I mean, that is nauseating.
You're accusing
That's
me of
so
not
crass.
listening to you. You see, you weren't listening to me.
No, because I was looking up the difference between beavers and groundhogs. Do you know the difference between beavers and groundhogs?
Yeah, one's a beaver, one's a groundhog.
Okay, fine. Thank you.
Now, do you have any feeling? I mean, do you think we go overboard on this Punxsutawney Phil thing, especially since?
No, we do not.
Well, you both have a bias because if we were talking about the Punxsutawney rat, you wouldn't have a problem at all because both of you don't like rats. I happen to be the great defender of the rat.
Really?
I've talked about this. I think they're squirrels without the cute tail.
I really don't think so. Okay, I really, and I don't.
They're a beaver without the cute tail. Does that work?
I think that the problem with the tail is a major issue because rats have the ugliest tail ever.
So now we're going to judge them because they're ugly and they can't tell whether.
Did you see the video last year where the rat was this in Boston where the rat crawled up the guy's leg?
Ew.
Was that on the subway or something?
I don't know.
Whatever.
The best one though is the rat taking the piece of pizza down the stairs.
Best
Pizza rat. If you haven't seen that, that's
pizza
a riot.
There's nothing to see here. I'm just taking this. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. What are you doing in the show?
Not amused.
What? No, I'm fairly amused. What are you doing?
Courtney Swain, who is a fabulous artist who designs soundscapes. Her colleagues describe her as adventurous. She creates beautiful music. She's going to be performing live on the show as part of the Stave Music Festival, Stave Sessions, as part of Celebrity Series, where we get to see emerging artists and hear emerging artists. Abelardo Morel about his exhibition about Monet and Constable, and then we've been hearing a lot about the life and times of Michael Kay, a show that's just come to town. It's an internationally touring show, and we will speak with two of the performers in that. It's told through puppets, and it's been described as very captivating. So I'm eager to dive into that with them.
You ever had any live animals? We've had live animals on our show. Have you had live animals on your show?
In our very young 1 year of the Culture Show, I do not think that we have had any animals on the show.
We had the llama. Remember the llama that came in with little red shoes?
That was an alpaca.
Alpaca.
Same thing. Whatever.
Alpaca. Yeah, it was like a dog.
Remember we had the beaver?
We didn't have a beaver.
We didn't have beaver. But
no,
we did. Jon Gruber
thing.
brought in 2 parrots and they crapped all over the studio.
We had the thing that with the big teeth. What do you call those things that go after? No, not a gopher. I can't think of it.
No, not a gopher. He said a goat. He didn't say a gopher.
Not a goat. A killer thing.
We had a killer thing.
Crocodile?
We had a killer thing. We had a killer thing.
Piranha, crocodile.
Oh, God, I can't think of their names.
This is not going well. Okay,
bye.
Jared, go do your show. 2 o'clock sharp. No,
Jared,
whatever.
Thank you very much. Okay.
Remember the security guards who were wonderful here almost didn't let the goat in the hotel? Or
well, they were suspicious. What was the goat doing here? And the goat refused to answer.
Okay.
Funding for our programs comes from you and the American Association for the Advancement of Science. Attendees of this year's